What's up, everybody? Welcome to Wire2Wire Sports, episode 127. 127. It's a big number. It's crazy. I'm going to be your host this evening, Bill Shawcross, the devilishly handsome Uncle Shally. Some people might call me Scholastic Shally. We'll probably stick with that this week, because of the NCAA March Madness beginning. To my right, my main man is going to keep this train on the tracks this evening. The one and only Ohio State fan that I actually like, and equally avid college sports fan, and a very proud alumni of the 12th ranked, 12th seeded, I should say, Kent State Golden Flashes. We'll talk about that soon. But Mr. College Cottrell, how you feeling tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm feeling great, man. We're missing a big presence here, but I'm sure we'll hear from him on the comment section here soon.
I'm
Uh,
I'm I'm utterly shocked that he wasn't waiting in the comments. But for everybody wondering, Mean Gene Okerlund is taking the week off, which is a little unfortunate with the timing. Because I will take a little bit of credit for this, and Cottrell can as well. We've turned Gene into a pretty big college sports fan, and I love that. So this is unfortunate week for him to miss for timing wise. I'm a little bit annoyed because I didn't know we could take vacations from the show, but apparently we can. So talk to Gene about that when he gets back. But Gene is on a cruise, wearing his floaties, drinking some umbrella drinks. Probably got a little suntan lotion on his nose, but he's enjoying himself. Some much well deserved R&R on a cruise. So I hope he's having fun. I'm sure he's going to pop in here soon. But we have I don't know about you. This is one of my most favorite shows of the year. Night before
Absolutely.
March Madness is like Christmas Eve for me. So I think the only other night I get more excited for would be the night before college football. But we have an absolute jam-packed, crazy show tonight. So we're gonna do March Madness. It's the biggest topic in sports. We're gonna start with it. We're gonna go all the way through both of our brackets, break down every game, all the way to the Final Four. We're gonna tell you our champions, and then we're gonna see what we agree on and what we disagree on. We have NFL to get to, and it has been an absolute bonkers of a free agency already. A ton of moves to go
Yes.
over, a couple moves we know are coming in the works. And then last but not least, we have another UFC pay per view with two very intriguing and, quite honestly, very important fights for both divisions that they're in. So we have a lot to get through, and we're gonna get going because this is gonna be a fun show. So we're gonna start with, like I said, March Madness. We're gonna start in the East,
South.
South. Sorry, South. See, that's why Control's here. What are your like overall thoughts though after finally digesting the bracket and going through it and filling a bunch of them up and ripping them up and starting over, now that everything's set in stone and we're getting ready to go tomorrow, like what are some of your just initial thoughts, and what were some things that were surprising to you, and you know things that made you say wow.
I mean, I would say the biggest thing for me was the fact that like some of the seating in this, Duke going the whole way, winning their conference and being a 5 seed. I was really not expecting them to be that low. I thought they might pop up on the 4 line, and then some of the lower seeded teams as well. I thought Furman kind of got screwed being a 13 seed. I know we're going to talk about their matchup here coming up. I think Kent got screwed being a 13 seed with their matchup. I thought they would be a little bit higher. I thought they could be a 12, maybe even an 11, depending on how things shook out. But um, I I will say though, I think the committee did a pretty good job getting everything together. I was surprised Rutgers as a whole didn't make the tournament. That was
Agreed.
one thing that really shocked me. But I mean, the seating as a whole, I actually like it. I think that they put forth some really really good matchups.
I do. I agree with a lot of what you said, and I actually think the committee this year seeded things based upon matchups almost over maybe what teams deserved
Deserved.
actual
Yep.
seeds.
Agreed.
I love that you brought up Duke. I think Duke and Miami having the same seed, I thought that was very interesting. I think Kent State being a 13, and out of the 13s, getting probably the toughest four in the tournament. I thought was wild. I thought that was really surprising to me, coming from, for a team that won its tournament. I thought maybe they should be on the 12 seed, maybe even 11 on the 11 line. They weren't an at-large team, so to get them and then throw them against, like I said, in my opinion, the toughest four in the tournament, that was very surprising. And I agree 100% with you on Rutgers. I was shocked Rutgers got snubbed. I thought they won a game or two, and they beat Michigan in the tournament, which was another last four in at that time type team. I thought they did enough to get in. They had a pretty good season, and that was with missing their best player for the majority of it. Shocked Rutgers didn't get in. I think Rutgers is better than at least 3 or 4 teams that got into this tournament.
Agreed.
But see, there he is. He's here. He's here. He's here. From the Care Bear voyage in the Bahamas, Gene is checked in. Stay safe. Don't go overboard, buddy. But we're going to start in the South. So I think, like I said, we're going to break down these matchups one by one. But I think some of these, we can skip over at the beginning to not waste too much time. Like, I don't think we need to talk about Alabama versus Texas A&M too in depth right now. I think we'll break down Alabama when we get a little bit further in. So, I think it's a great result for Texas A&M. To get here, they won their playing game. They're playing the number 1 overall seed in the entire tournament in Alabama. I expect a comfortable win for Alabama.
Same. Alabama is, I'm sure a lot of people in that have filled out a bracket already, they're expecting Alabama to even win it all. So I don't think they struggle too much with their playing game. This isn't one of those sneaky 116 matchups or anything like that. So Alabama rolls. I don't see any issue.
I agree. I think it's a very easy game for Alabama just to kind of get their feet wet and get into the tournament and get comfortable.
Yep.
Next game, however, I think is a very interesting matchup. You got Maryland versus West Virginia, 8 versus 9, Big 10 versus Big 12. 2 teams, ironically, that play very, very well at home and very, very poorly on the road. You have Bob Huggins, who's been in the tournament forever, always has sneaky good teams, love to press, love to play, defense. And even Maryland team this year that kind of came out of nowhere, has a couple really big wins under their belt, a couple really head-scratching losses as well. How do you see this one going?
I like Maryland in this one, actually. West Virginia, yeah, they play great defense, and defense does, win championships, things like that. My problem with West Virginia is random times they just struggle to score. And I think in a tournament game, you have to be consistently able to put the ball in the basket. I think Maryland was a team that got hot down the stretch, and they ultimately didn't finish up where I thought that they would. There was a point in time in February where I thought, hey, Maryland keeps it rolling, they might end up on the 5 line, maybe a 6. But ultimately they end up as an 8 here. And we were talking about Maryland as a team that could potentially, win the Big Ten tournament when we did our previews for that show. So I think Maryland takes care of West Virginia. I think they can beat the press, and I think they'll be fine.
I agree with you. I think Maryland gets it done. I think it's 2 teams that score very well. The one thing I will say is I watched West Virginia play a couple times this year against Texas. I saw them play Kansas State and Kansas. This is a very Bob Higgins type team where they're pressing a lot, but they're not creating a lot of turnovers this year. And also, they're not that great defensively, which is usually a staple of one of his teams. Anytime you get in a tournament like that, any team that can count on getting a stop or even causing turnovers, I tend to side with, because I just have a weird thinking about it that sometimes I think the teams that are really comfortable on defense, it's easier for them to play defense than it is offense sometimes. So to your point, I think Maryland's going to be able to score. I think it's a very good game. I think it's a close game. I believe this is the first game tomorrow, if I'm not incorrect. I think this is the first game on TV tomorrow. I think this game opens the tournament, but I think Maryland wins a close one, and I think the Terps move on. First 5-12 matchup of the tournament: San Diego State Aztecs versus Charleston. Charleston, as I know, is a team that me and you have both been watching all year and are very high on. San Diego State is a team that is known for their defense. It's kind of like their staple. I said a couple shows ago, they're a poor man's Houston, which is kind of how I look at them. curious to see who you're picking in this.
San Diego State is a team that's hot. I mean, they've won like 9 of their last 10 or something along the lines of that. Clearly, they won their conference tournament as well. But there's one thing I like about this Charleston team is that, one, they rebound the basketball well. 2, they shoot the 3-pointer at such an extreme level, not only attempts wise but percentage wise as well. I think when you have a team like College of Charleston, like that's what you need if you're gonna be, a team that's gonna be putting teams on upset alert. Like you have to hit the three, and you have to be able to consistently score. I love Charleston in this matchup. Like I have Charleston moving on here. Obviously, I talked about them throughout the season going forward. Charleston's one of those teams, like they're top 10 in scoring in the country. Like I think San Diego State, like I know they're known for their defense, but if this game gets in the 70s, maybe even the 80s, I don't see how Charleston doesn't win that matchup. So I like Charleston in this one for the first upset of the tournament.
I love it. Love the breakdown. I love a couple points that you brought up that I wanted to touch on, and I love the pick. I'm going with Charleston as well. I would actually almost be more shocked if Charleston loses this game than I would if they win it. It's no disrespect to San Diego State. You brought up a good point for me, though. This is one of the fastest paced playing teams in the tournament. They go down, they chuck up threes. I think they score something. They're the only team in the tournament, I believe, that scores over 40% of all their points from the 3-point line. The only thing that I think that's really going to be able to hamper them is if they have a bad shooting night. And if they do, they're susceptible to losing. They're not the best half-court team in the world, and that would play right into San Diego State's hands. San Diego State is a very, very good defensive team. The one point you brought up, though, and I've said this before, San Diego State a lot of times struggles to score, and their other Achilles heel is they struggle to put people away. And I think when you're playing a really good shooting team like Charleston, that can easily come back to bite you in the butt. And the bigger point that you made, which I loved, was I think this game has to be in the 60s for San Diego State to win. Because I think if it's in the 70s or higher, I completely agree with you. I think that means Charleston's winning. If Charleston can come out and start this game on any kind of run or make San Diego State catch up or play catch up, I think that's a huge disadvantage to San Diego State. The longer this game stays close, the longer the odds of San Diego State, I think, winning go up. But I agree with you. I think Charleston wins, and I think we're getting a 12/5 right off the bat tomorrow. So I like Charleston to move on as well. Next game on the docket is another game, depending on who you talk to, that I think is very prime for an upset. Number 4 seeded Virginia Cavaliers versus number 13 Furman, another very sneaky good, experienced team in the tournament. Who you got, Control?
Again, I told you this is another team like Furman. They play. I'm not going to say similar to Charleston, but they put the ball in the bucket at a similar clip. So this matchup is great because you have Furman that's a top 5, top 10 offensive team going up against a Virginia team that's top 10 defensively in points allowed. So it's going to be a battle of the best offensive versus the best defensive. And I really like this Furman team, man. I really do. I'm rolling with Furman in this one. I think Virginia obviously is the more talented team, and they even shocked me a little bit in the ACC tournament, them performing how they did there. But I'm rolling with Furman in this one. I think this is going to be a game that gets into that 70, 75 range, and I think Furman has enough to make it happen. Furman shoots the ball very well from 3. And they got a lot of senior leadership on that team. So I think we're going to have a 13-12 matchup, before the weekend is over.
This is one of the hardest games for me to pick. This is not a typical Tony Bennett Cavalier team in that they play lockdown defense and pray to get to 50 points. And if they do, they probably win. They're still very good defensively, but they have a couple transfers that they got in the transfer portal this year. They can actually score the ball a little bit better. I think one thing that's getting lost on a lot of people is that Virginia did win the ACC this year, regular season anyway. They're good. I think if there's one knock against them, they're a little bit small. They're not the biggest or the tallest team. Furman, on the other hand, most accurate 2-point shooting percentage team in the tournament. Like your other point you brought up, they love chucking up threes. They're big. I think their biggest issue is Defensively, they allow one of the highest shooting percentages in the tournament. Um, sneaky deep team. Like you said, a lot of veteran leadership from guys that have been in the program for a couple years. I wanted to pick Furman. I really did. I really did. I just think it gets back to kind of what I said a couple minutes ago. I think Virginia is more comfortable in their own skin playing defense. And I think if either one of these teams need to stop down the stretch, I feel more comfortable in Virginia getting it. I'm going to go to Virginia in a one possession game. I'll say Virginia squeaks by the skin of their teeth, and they move on to the next round. Won't be surprised at all if I'm wrong on that one though. And part of me will secretly be rooting for Furman because I love chaos. So, next matchup, I think this is a very good game, kind of flying under the radar that nobody's really talking about because I think so many people are high on Furman and Charleston, creating upsets in their games. But I think Creighton versus NC State's going to be a great game. I have NC State moving on. I think they're battle tested in their depth. I like the way they play defense. They're one of the bigger teams in the tournament. And I've watched Creighton play twice now, and I think Creighton is great. Creighton reminds me of, I don't want to compare them to Golden State, but they're very very reliant on a as a jump shooting team, and when they're making their shots, they look like a well-oiled machine. It's like watching Steph and Clay chuck up threes, but when they don't make their shots, they do not, they're not great running any kind of half court sets down low to anybody inside. And they don't play great defense, which for me is a recipe for disaster. If you don't come out shooting well, I think they could fall behind early, and I think it can get ugly. So I'm NC State with a mild upset here, moving on to the next round.
I am on the opposite side of you on this one. I got Creighton. I like Creighton. I know that Creighton has had their ups and downs so far this season. We were talking about a couple weeks ago when they lost to Villanova in the Big East. In the Big East matchup, it was kind of eye-opening. It was like, hey, maybe Creighton isn't this special team that people think they have the potential to be. But I think them performing how well as they did in the Big East tournament, I truly think Creighton is one of those teams. Like if you're talking 5 seed and below, I think Creighton's one of those teams that's sneakily good enough to make it to not only the Sweet 16, but I think they can make an Elite 8 Final Four caliber push. Like I think they have that kind of talent, and I think the bottom half of the South is weak enough for them to make that kind of push.
I agree with you with the bottom half of the South being weak, and I'm going to get into that in a minute with the next matchup. But I also agree with Petey, and I agree with kind of what you said. I just feel that way about North Carolina State, like you do Creighton. I think North Carolina State has the talent and the depth to possibly end up in the Elite 8. I think they have that run in them. I think the bracket could possibly break that way for them. So, I mean, I think it's going to be very interesting who wins that game because I think either one of those teams could possibly, beat the winner of this next game we're going to talk about, which is the Baylor Bears, who, we've been very fond of on the show. In the first year we had the show when the national championship that year, the UC Santa Barbara. Who you got in this one?
I got Baylor. I think that Baylor and UC Santa Barbara, I think they play very similarly. Neither one of them love to play defense this season, but they score with the best of them. I think Baylor just has too many guys though, and in a game where it's going to come down to who's going to score more buckets. Like, 'cause I don't think defense is going to be played in this one. Like, I think this will be a fun game to watch, but I think Baylor just has too many guys. I think they're going to out athlete UC Santa Barbara. So I like Baylor in this one. I like them relatively comfortable.
I'm going to agree with you. Pretty much across the board. I think this is not, Scott Drew's best Baylor team by any means. I think they have one of the key, key elements you need to make a deep run in guard play. They always do. I think all 3 of their guards are very capable.
Yep.
I think their forwards are very susceptible. I just don't think UC Santa Barbara is a team that's going to, expose that weakness enough and get a victory. UC Santa Barbara is another team. It's a high scoring team. They don't play defense real well and they don't rebound real well. So I think it lets Baylor off the hook a little bit with their biggest weakness in in cleaning up the glass both offensively and defensively. I think Baylor wins comfortably too. I don't know if I don't know what the spread is. I don't know if they cover, but I do think they win by double digits. But to your point as well, I think this is probably a very enjoyable game to watch.
You want to just oh, actually, we got two more games in this.
Yeah. So we got where we going? We have three more games. Oh no, two.
Too, yeah.
So 7-10 matchup. Missouri, Utah State. Very interesting matchup. This is one of the matchups that I don't want to say I struggled to pick, but I went back and forth with a couple times. And it's also one of those matchups that every time I watch somebody on TV, they're split across the board. So it'd be very interesting to see how you view this game.
I'm taking Mizzou. I like Mizzou here. They put up a great performance in the SEC tournament. I believe they beat Tennessee in the SEC tournament. I was obviously skeptical of Missouri, but I think their level of competition, who they've played in the SEC, I think has prepared them for this. And I think Mizzou wins a tight one. I got Mizzou like 5 or 6 points in this one, but I think this is a close 7-10 matchup.
I'm going with Mizzou as well. I've second guessed it a couple times, mainly because they are the worst defensive team for 2-point percentage allowed, the worst defensive team for 3-point percentage allowed, and also the worst defensive rebounding team in this tournament. You stack all three of those things up, I think you can make a case to say it sounds crazy to pick them to move on. Utah State is just more of a kind of a plodding along team. And to your point, Missouri is good offensively. They're very assertive. They're very efficient, and they love shooting the three. So I think there's going to be enough. I think there's going to be enough points scored where they get out of this and they can outscore Utah State. I think it's a very close game. I'm going with Missouri. Again, I'm not going to be mad if I get this wrong. I'm not going to be surprised anyway. I'll say that way. Last game we're going to do, I don't think we're going to spend too much time on this one. Arizona Wildcats versus the Princeton Tigers. Princeton won the Ivy League, obviously. Arizona Pac-10. Arizona is a lot of people's pick to win the whole tournament, let alone this game. I think Arizona wins comfortably. We'll get into that a little bit more later.
Yeah, I got Arizona comfortable as well. I don't think this one will be relatively close. I think this will be a pretty boring game. Arizona runs away with it.
So before we get down into the East, who do you think has the toughest bracket?
I was looking at it before, and I really think it's probably Purdue. As a 1 seed, I think Purdue is got the worst field.
See, I keep going back and forth between Purdue and Kansas, and I think Purdue has the potential to have tough games, but I sided with Kansas simply because I think there's two other teams in Kansas quarter that could win the whole tournament. And that was the hardest one for me to fill out. So I was curious to see what you thought on that. But
I think the other thing too with Kansas is I get it, they got blown out in the Big 12 tournament, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they respond to Bill Self being away, and then once he comes back, how they respond to that. It could be one of those things where hey, we want to win this, for coach, or it could be one of those things hey, our leader isn't here. We know what we have to do, but he's not implementing the game plans and all this stuff. We feel kind of lost without him. So it'll be interesting to see which Kansas team shows up for the tournament games.
I agree. I think Bill Self is top 3 or 4 coaches in college basketball. And I think his name doesn't get mentioned enough because he's not, he's not as high profile as some of the other guys. But I mean, you look at his record. I mean, I think he's got 2, maybe 3 national championships now. I mean, the guy gets it done every single year. But we'll talk about them in a little bit. But I agree with everything you said. I think it will be interesting to see him back on the bench. And, like you said, when you have your head coach calling sets versus an assistant, I mean, it's still a drop off no matter how good your assistants are.
Yep.
And kids are just going to respond better to you. But on to the East we go.
I was going to ask you, do you want to move on to the East, or do you want to finish like the South and get to who we got in the Final Four and then move on to the?
Let's do it that way. Let's do it that way. Let's finish the South and go through it, and then whoever we both have sitting there at the end, and then we'll go to the East and see who they're going to face. I'm fine with that.
All right, so we both have Bama and Maryland this round 32.
Correct. I think again, I think Bama wins here. I think it's I don't want to say blowout by any means, but I think it's probably a double digit victory, 10, 12 points somewhere in there. Alabama is one of the best teams efficiency wise, both offensively and defensively. I don't think Maryland is going to be able to keep up offensively, and I'll have Alabama moving on.
I have Alabama as well. I think you said it perfectly with the point differential. I think it'll be a double digit game. I could see Bama winning anywhere from 10 to 20 points in this one. So I don't think Bama struggles too heavily in this one. Maybe they start off slow. Bama has a tendency to start off slow, but I think the guys that Bama has, Brandon Miller is he's gonna have it roll. I think this will be an easy game for Bama.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up Brandon Miller. He is easily a top 3 or 4 player in this entire tournament. He is an absolute stud. If you're not familiar with what he has going on off the court, I think that becomes the interesting situation, how he handles this. I think he's been a little bit isolated and shielded from it being in Alabama. With now it all being the national press and them being out on the road and them kind of being by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to see how he handles it. I'm curious to see how the team handles it and, kind of keeping him away from it. So I think if they can rally behind him and, kind of keep him focused and, keep him calm and feel like everything's okay, then I think Alabama's a big problem for everybody they're going to face.
I will say too, like that Bama team, obviously I think so far at least they've done a great job of keeping everything in-house and not having it be this big distraction, although nationally it's getting covered everywhere. The other thing that I really love about this Bama team is, their head coach, Nate Oates, like he has this tournament experience. Obviously, he's had Bama in the tournament before, but even before that, when he was still in the MAC and he was coaching Buffalo, like he had those Buffalo teams having teams on upset alert like that. He was coaching the team that took out that Arizona team when DeAndre Ayton was there. So Nate Oates has that experience, and I think he'll have those guys ready to go. And I think all the focus will be on where it needs to be.
He is by any means a very, very good players coach. You can see those guys, how they celebrate with him, how they rally around him. That's the kind of coach you want in the NCAA tournament, almost like he's an extension of the team or like he's another player and like a friend, but they still respect him. And that's the type of coach he is. And that's why, he did so well in the MAC and then got a job at a huge SEC school. That's what it takes to win. And, he's turned Alabama into a very good basketball program all of a sudden. So I don't think we're done talking about them yet. So we'll move on to the next game. But this game for me, so I have Charleston versus Virginia. You have Charleston versus Furman to
Correct.
Guarantee either a 12 or a 13 seed makes it to the Sweet 16. I am going with Charleston over Virginia. I think they have the perfect recipe to beat Virginia. Again, kind of like the San Diego State game, I think it's a very similar matchup for them, and I think it matches up perfectly for them. I think they're going to outshoot Virginia. I think Virginia's going to have to come out of their shell and try to get into almost a track meet with them, and they're not comfortable doing that. It's not the type of game and pace of play that Tony Bennett and the Cavaliers want to play with. So I'm going Charleston into the Sweet 16.
I am also going Charleston to the Sweet 16. I think in a matchup between Charleston and Furman, again, I said it when I broke down their games originally, these are two teams that play very similarly. And I think if they were to play each other, I would trust Charleston a little bit more just because they're better at rebounding the basketball. Because I think when you get in games like that, if it's a track meet, you're chucking up threes and it's a back and forth game. It's about who's getting their team extra possessions and who's having the opposite team, the opposing team, limiting them to one possession. So I trust Charleston just a little bit more, and I got my double digit seed moving on out of the first weekend.
So the next game for me, if you scroll down a little bit, I will have NC State versus Baylor, and you will have Creighton versus Baylor.
Correct.
So I am going with another upset here. I am going with NC State to upset Baylor. I think their defensive presence, and I think this is a game where Baylor gets exposed down low. NC State's got bigs. They've experienced forwards in the center. They crash the boards hard. They're a physical team. And I think they're going to be able to stay in front of Baylor's guards enough for them to score. And I think Baylor's going to struggle mightily down low defending NC State. So I'm going NC State in a squeaker to move on to the Sweet 16.
So on that one, I would have Creighton versus Baylor, and I got Baylor moving on. I don't love it. I'm not in love with Baylor this year. I honestly thought Baylor was one of those teams that could be like one of those higher seeded teams and get put out during the first weekend. But I think they drew favorable matchups, and I would trust Baylor versus NC State or Creighton. And I picked them the first game against Santa Barbara. So I think Baylor moves on, but it's very begrudgingly. I don't love them.
So you're going to stick with Baylor?
I am. I got them getting out the first weekend, although they've kind of they backpedaled into the tournaments. But
next matchup I think we both have Missouri versus Arizona, correct?
Correct.
I think this game is very straightforward. I think Arizona is another one of those teams that's very balanced, very well disciplined on both ends of the court. I think they just have way too much from Missouri. I think Missouri is going to get behind early. Probably have to take chuck up a bunch of threes to try to stay in the game. And if they don't go down, I think this game could get very ugly early. So I will say Arizona moves on easily to the Sweet 16.
Agreed. I love Arizona here. I think Arizona is one of those teams that we haven't really talked about all season about being legit title contenders, but the way that they play basketball and especially the way that they've played as of late, beating a UCLA team, that's very, very, important, and it means a lot, especially at this time of the year. So I think Arizona is one of those teams that we have to seriously consider as one of those teams that can contend for a title this year. So I like Arizona here. I think they move on pretty easily over Mizzou.
So back to the top, we both have Alabama versus Charleston, and then I have NC State versus Arizona, and you have Baylor versus Arizona.
Correct.
So you brought up something tonight that we've also talked about on previous shows about Alabama. I think they have a very horrible tendency to come out flat sometimes and fall behind teams, and they rely on their defense and their shooting and Brandon Miller to get back into games. This is a game they cannot afford to do that, because if they do that, I don't know if Charleston takes their foot off the gas enough and stops shooting enough to let them back in the game. I think Alabama wins and goes to the Elite Eight. I think it's very close, and I'm talking one possession. Maybe Charleston has the ball, shooting for the win. I think it's that close type of game. I think this is the first great game of the tournament. I'm going Alabama. I'm going Alabama very, very close, and I will not be shocked if Charleston beats them.
So I have the same pick, a little bit different breakdown. I'm also rolling with Alabama. I agree with what you said. I think Charleston is one of those teams like, hey, we gotta put Bama on notice. I think they start off hot. But I think once Bama goes on that run, because it happens every single game, if Bama goes on that run, Charleston starts turning the ball over, I think the wheels fall off of this Charleston bus. I think the way that Bama is, they're one of the streakiest teams in the country, when it comes to forcing turnovers and just going on these runs. And I think against a team like Charleston, that's very possible. Charleston, yes, they score the ball great. They don't have great guard play. Their guards are fine. It's not a knock on them, but when things get tight, they don't have the playmakers to say, hey, we're going to put the ball in your hands and you go to work and get this done. They play great team basketball. But I think once Bama gets it going, they start flying around. I think this game has a potential to get ugly. I think again, I got Bama rolling this one. I don't think it's going to be relatively close. I got Bama by like 15 or so in this one. Like I don't think Bama has a close game until the Elite Eight.
So the one stat I did see about Charleston, they're 11-2 in games decided by 5 points or less. So they are comfortable in playing tight games. Um, the one thing that I think that always concerns me about the little schools when they get past the first weekend, I almost wish they didn't have to go back to campus
Yep.
and they kind of
Hear about it and
stayed on the road and played their Sweet 16 game 2 days later versus a week later. Because like you said, they go back to campus and all of a sudden they're the kings of campus and everybody's telling them how great they are. Some teams respond well to that. You had the Hofstra team or St. Pete's, I'm sorry, from last year. Um, and other teams you don't like. You see them come back out and you can just tell that they were sniffing the glue all week about how they're the best thing since sliced bread and they get murdered. So we'll see. Any kind of small team like that, it's one thing that always worries me. But I think we both have Alabama moving on, and we'll
yep.
see how that game plays out. NC State versus Arizona. For me, I think this is a pretty straightforward game. I think NC State is very good. They're very balanced. I just think everything NC State does, Arizona is better than them at it. And I think that's what it's going to boil down to. I think Arizona is a little tad deeper. They have a little bit easier time scoring. They have more guys that can score comfortably. I think Arizona wins by 7 or 8 points, and we set up an absolute great matchup with Alabama to go to the Final Four.
In my matchup, I have Arizona against Baylor. I'm rolling with Arizona here. For Baylor, this is where the buck stops. I don't think Baylor deserves to even make it this far. Again, I just think they had very, very, very good draws for their sake. I wouldn't be surprised if Baylor's not here come Sweet 16, but like you said, Bill, Arizona is such a balanced team, and I think they're playing their best ball right now. And that's how you need it to happen. You need to be playing your best ball in the middle of March. And I think for an Arizona team, like this is a perfect matchup for them because they'll play defense. They'll drag Baylor down to the muddy waters, and they also have the ability to score. So I think this is a bad matchup for Baylor, and I like Arizona to move on.
So, first Elite Eight matchup we get to Alabama versus Arizona. Uh, there are a lot of people picking both of these teams not to let alone win this region, win this entire tournament. A lot of people think whoever comes out of this region is going to win the tournament. Um, I am going to go with Alabama. I think after the College of Charleston, it's kind of a little bit of a wake up call. I think they come out ready to play against Arizona. And I'm going to, as great as Brandon Miller is, he's going to be the best player in the court in this game. But I'm going to take Alabama's defense as the reason that they win this game. I think they score enough points, and I think they get enough stops, and I think they force Arizona out of their comfort zone. Enough. I think this game's probably low 70s, high 60s. I think this is the first real battle that we see, and I like Alabama moving on to the Final Four.
I couldn't agree with you more. I like Bama moving on as well. When you have a player like Brandon Miller, and I know we've already talked about him, when you have a player like that, this is where he's supposed to shine. He's an All-American this year. He's going to be a lottery pick next year, assuming everything works out for him and all his off the court stuff. And this is when those caliber players make those big time plays. And I think you're going to see that. I think this is a game where you could see Brandon Miller go for 30 and put Alabama on his back to will them to the Final Four. So I like Bama in this one. I think they're the more balanced team, and as balanced I think Arizona is. When you got two forces like that meeting, I think it's going to come down to who has the best player on the court. And in this game, it goes to Bama because they got Brandon Miller. So I like Bama moving on.
All right, so we agree on that bracket.
All right, so that means like Mizzou's going to the Final Four in that region.
Put all your money on somebody other than Alabama. Probably
This is a
Baylor.
fun one.
Probably Baylor since we trashed them the whole talk.
East.
East, Purdue, number one seed. What a ride that team's been on. They were one of the consensus number one teams to start the year. Came out like gangbusters. I think they were like 18-0 before they lost.
Yep.
Then they went through like a 3 or 4 week period where I think they were like 4-4. They couldn't beat anybody good. And then all of a sudden they got into the Big Ten tournament, and it was like they flipped a switch, and they looked like Purdue from the beginning of the year. And now they kind of look like dangerous Purdue again. This team's driving me nuts. I mean, we both watch a lot of Big Ten basketball for obvious reasons. I've seen them play Michigan twice, and again, the one time they played, I was like, I don't know if anybody can beat Purdue in the country. And the next time they played, we were missing our point guard and like 3 other starters, and we almost beat them in Purdue. And I was like, this team stinks. They're kind of a Jekyll and Hyde team, and but it's, if you're going off recent bias, it's they went to the Big Ten tournament and they took care of business.
Yes, they did.
Man, it's I mean, they're going to win their first round matchup. I mean, so I'm not going to go on and on and on about this. They're obviously advancing out of their first matchup, but curious to see how far we both have them going, because this to me is, I don't know if it's the most difficult region. I think it has the chance to be the most unpredictable, though. If that makes sense.
I can agree with you there. I do think it's the most difficult though, because I think you got 4 or 5 teams that I think legit have a shot to make it to the Elite Eight. And with, we just went through the South. I think up there you really only have. I mean, I put a lot of confidence in Arizona and Bama making it to the Elite Eight. This one, there's like 8 teams that if they make it to the Elite Eight, like I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised about the matchup. Like I wouldn't be like, how did we get here? In the South, though, I would have a lot of questions about how do we get here if it doesn't end up being at least one of the two with Bama and Arizona.
Agreed. I feel like the East is probably the bracket buster of the 4 this year. Probably a lot of people after this weekend are probably just gonna be like, forget the East, dude. I'm not getting any more points out of the East. I got my other 3 Final Four teams alive still.
Yep.
I think that's a chance to be chaos. Chaos is good for viewership and it's good for us. So, but again, I think I'm assuming you have Purdue winning their first round matchup.
Yep, I do. Purdue moves on easy.
So next matchup, very intriguing. You get the Memphis Tigers versus the Florida Atlantic University Owls. Memphis, team that, kind of the opposite of Purdue. Started out slow, got hot in the middle. Towards the end of the regular season, kind of same thing, kind of like limping towards the finish. Won their last 2 big games, then got into the tournament and mollywopped everybody, including Houston in the final. It's do you buy into that, or do you buy into kind of what the average of what they normally are? Florida Atlantic is a team that loves to shoot the ball, just kind of run down the court, chuck it up, go back, play defense no matter what happens. I think Memphis has too much for them. I think they are playing well. I'm going to take Memphis in a close game.
I like Memphis as well. You talked about Memphis. Obviously, they won their tournament and they beat Houston, and I think that's no small feat. The one thing I love about Houston though is that Penny Hardaway has every year, it seems like, he has those guys ready to play in the tournament. Last year, they were also an 8 seed, and I know they underperformed. They had Jalen Duren and Imani Bates, 2 of the most highly touted freshmen in the country, and they were an 8 seed, but they gave Gonzaga all they can handle last year. And, no one was expecting that. We knew they had the talent to do so, but no one was actually expecting them to push Gonzaga to their limits last year. I think Penny does a great job of getting the most out of his guys. And the great thing about it is this year, you have guys that have experience from the last couple years tournaments. Kendrick Davis is scoring the ball at an absolutely unbelievable clip, averaging over 20 a game. I think in this game, he's going to be the best player on the court. And he's a senior guard. I love senior led teams, especially if they're guards. So I like Memphis in this one, and I think they move on to a great matchup against Purdue.
So this next one, whew, seeing a million people on each side of it. Duke versus Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts was the other team that, if you go back a couple shows, me and Cottrell were both telling everybody and their mother to watch out for if they got through their conference tournament. I think Oral Roberts got a horrible draw here and a horrible seeding. Because I will tell you this: if they were on the 12-5 line with any other five, and I'm not saying they don't win this game, but I would feel comfortable picking them against every other five seed in this tournament.
Agreed.
Um, Oral Roberts is very, very good. They are deep. They're experienced. They have height. They have length. They can shoot. They can play defense. They can run. They can play half court. Um, Duke is going to have their hands full. I promise you, when this bracket came out, that is not who Duke wanted to see on the 12 line. Um, all their fans will tell you that they're not afraid. They'll play whoever. But I'm telling you, they did not want Oral Roberts as their first game.
Nope.
Everybody remembers the meltdowns from 5 or 6 years ago when they lost to Lehigh, and everybody in the country was picking Lehigh to beat them. You have a lot of people picking Oral Roberts. Thing that I want to say worries me is, but I felt my initial reaction towards this, which is what I ended up going with. You have a lot of people picking Oral Roberts, but the people who don't pick Oral Roberts, they have Duke in like the Elite Eight or the Final Four, which is it's just crazy. Like it's very polarizing how people view this game. But I'm gonna get into Duke. They've been a different team since uh, Tyrese Proctor went to point guard and they put Jeremy Roach as a shooting guard. They've been an absolute handful to stop defensively, let him play off the ball. If there's one thing I'm worried about with Duke is it's they're young. They're really young, and they're playing for a head coach, his first time coaching an NCAA tournament. That scares me. Um, I think they're a little bit more talented team, but is this a situation where the better team that plays like a team wins? Because I think Oral Roberts has every opportunity in the world to be that team. Um, I'm going with my gut here. I would love to pick against them because I hate them, but I'm going to go with Duke in a very, very, very tight game, and probably deep down, in my soul, I'm probably rooting for Oral Roberts to win anyway and blow up my bracket. I really don't care.
So I think I agree with a lot of the points that you made. The one name that you didn't bring up for Duke is arguably their best player, and Kyle Filipowski. He is 7-footer, and he's their go-to guy. Yeah, and I think what's great about this matchup is Oral Roberts has a 7-footer on their team that'll be right there banging with them. So I think this is 100% not the matchup that Oral Roberts would have wanted to draw. But again, we talked about the committee. It seems like this year they favorite those matchups as opposed to which seeds deserve to play who. And this is going to be one of those fun matchups. Obviously, Oral Roberts this is the team that upset Ohio State in 15-2 matchup a couple years ago. And their leader from that team was Max Abmas, and he's back. Like, he's a senior this year. He's still putting the ball in the bucket at an insane rate, averages over 20 plus. This is going to be a great game, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if Oral Roberts won, but I'm picking Duke simply because I think right now they're playing great basketball, and I don't know. There's something about this Duke team. The way that I saw them play against Miami in the ACC championship game, like, I have confidence in this team. If you'd asked me about this matchup 2 weeks ago, I'm picking Oral Roberts, and I'm probably not thinking twice about it.
Agreed, 100%. I love that you said that. 2, 3 weeks ago, if you would have asked me this before they went on this run, I'd be like, I think Duke goes out in the first round no matter who they play. Same thing, man. They made the switch, and they got in the ACC tournament. They beat the hell out of everybody, and pretty much walked right through it. And here they are. It's actually, honestly, with the way Duke kind of always gets fluffy seating as it was, and having the decent year they did, and then winning the ACC tournament, I was shocked Duke was a 5, to be honest. I really thought Duke was going to be a 4, maybe an outside 3. I was shocked they were still in the 5 line.
Yep.
But this next game, a lot of intrigue here as well. Number 4 Tennessee, number 13 Louisiana. A lot of people have Tennessee on upset alert. Tennessee was a team, me, Cottrell, and Gene, I believe Gene as well, very high on preseason. They play great defense. It's they can get sluggish offensively, and that's now been magnified even more with Zakai Ziegler. They're all everything point guard, tearing his ACL a couple weeks ago. It's tough. It's tough because I think they're good enough. They still score enough. They were 6th in the scoring in SEC. I think they're still good enough to win a bunch of games because they're so great defensively, and they're smart, and they don't turn the ball over. I'm going to have them getting by Louisiana. I think this is a closer game than a lot of people think, though.
Agreed. I think this game will be a little bit tougher. Tennessee has had a few games to kind of mend the bridge. Obviously, losing Zakai it's a huge loss for them. And as soon as it happened, I immediately took them out of my serious championship contending vision. But the thing about it too is that I think this Tennessee team, they're coached well. I think they can make it. They can make it through and win this matchup with ease. I mean, they still have great guys on the roster, so losing your point guard is going to be tough. But I think they'll still be able to get through Louisiana.
Next game, Kentucky, another team. A lot of dark horse. A lot of people picking Kentucky to come out, make the Final Four. I think a lot of people are still high on the potential of this team. Providence, team that started out hot, kind of struggled towards the end, and then kind of found it towards the end of the season as well, going into the tournament. I think it's a tricky game. I think it's a tricky game for Kentucky, if I'm being 100% honest. How do you see it?
I mean, I don't think necessarily tricky. I mean, I think Kentucky here is. You talked about Jekyll and Hyde. I think Kentucky is a good definition of that. When they're at their best, I think they can beat anybody in the country. But you'll see them lose games like them losing to Vanderbilt. Like, why does Vanderbilt have their number? Like, why
3 times.
Why is
3
that
times? It's crazy.
I think you have a lot of guys on this team. Kentucky hasn't been that powerhouse that's just been producing these first round picks year after year. Like their best player, Oscar Tshiebwe, he's been there for a couple years. He's got some age to him. He's been in these kinds of tournaments before. So I like Kentucky in this one. I think Calipari will have those guys going, and I don't think this one will be. It may be close in the second half, but I think it ends up being a 8 to 12 point win for Kentucky.
So, we made a lot of good points. You as well when you brought up Brandon Miller earlier. How, when you a superstar player, this is the time they have to shine. You just brought up Oscar Tshiebwe, who again is a top 5 player in this tournament. He's going to go into the draft. He's going to be a lottery pick. He's a guy that, if for Kentucky to do well, he has to have 2, 3, 4, 5 great games here in a row. To your Jekyll and Hyde comment, I agree. I think we all, and I know we talked about it on the show. I think the first time we talked about college basketball this year, we all thought this was going to be like the typical Calipari, kind of like, selling his team down the river, saying they suck, blah, 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 like he always does. And then all of a sudden they win like 10 games in a row and they go in the tournament, and then you blink your eye and they're in the Final Four. That didn't happen this year. I mean, it could happen, but they never really flipped that switch this year with all the talent they have. This isn't a typical Calipari team. And like you said, I mean, there's times we've watched them. I watched them play Alabama, and for half of that game, I was like, I haven't watched a better team play basketball this year. And they blew like a 15-point lead with like 7 minutes to go and lost. They're all over the place. And I think that's what's scary picking them. That being said, I think they can play a B game and get by Providence. I think Providence, if they're not shooting well, I'm not really sure how they're going to beat you. They don't have a lot of, I don't want to say they don't have a lot of depth, and they're not super scary defensively. So I have Kentucky winning here. I could see Kentucky winning by 20. I could see Kentucky winning by 2. And I think that's a scary thing if you're all in on Kentucky. Um, Next matchup, Kansas State versus Morehead State.
Montana.
Montana, sorry. Montana State. Um, Kansas State's another team. Um, Beat Kansas earlier in the year at home. Watched that game on ESPN. Another. Uh, I don't want to call them Jekyll and Hyde. They're a team that almost plays better when the games are close, and sometimes you can look at that as that's a great attribute to have in the tournament because you're going to have to play close games. My problem is they have a really hard time of putting teams behind them and kind of pulling away and making games easy on themselves. I think that's not a great attribute to have in the tournament. I think if you can run away and win games and have an easy game and advance to the next round easily, I think you should do that. And Kansas State struggles to put teams away. That being said, Montana coming out of the Big Sky, sneaky good team, experienced, senior and junior Latin team. I don't think the moment's going to be too big for them. I think they can give Kansas State fits for the first half. I think Kansas State pulls away a little bit towards the end. I'll take Kansas State to advance, but probably a closer game than people think.
I got Kansas State here. I mean, I get what you said. I think a lot of what we've seen so far from Kansas State is just being in that tough Big 12 conference. Like I think there was a lot of wear and tear on that team. Also, I mean, their best player, Keontae Johnson, obviously transferred in. He's a redshirt senior. This was a guy who collapsed while he was at Florida. He was on his way to being a lottery pick, and sat his 2 years, and he's healthy now, and he's transferred over to Kansas State, and he's their number one player over there. So I think this Kansas State team, if they lean on him, I'm sure he has a lot that he wants to prove. You know, this is a tournament that's kind of eluded him for the last 2 years. So I think he's going to put on a show. I like Kansas State to roll in this one.
Next one, very intriguing matchup. Number 10 Michigan State versus number 10 USC. Michigan State's team that started off not really healthy at the beginning of the year, struggled a little bit. Tom Izzo did what Tom Izzo does, though. They had the tragedy, unfortunately, of the shooting on campus, and really, ever since that, they played Michigan 2 days after that, but everything was kind of, emotionally wise, everything was kind of raw, and I don't think the kids were really past it yet. And ever since that game, I think they've lost one game since then, which was in the tournament. They have a trio of guards that can all score, between Tyson Walker, Joey Hauser, AJ Hoggard. This is kind of a non-Izzo team too, which is kind of weird. And I think he struggled to adapt to coaching it a little bit, to be quite honest. Izzo's teams were always built off of, half court sets, playing great defense, rebounding, not turning the ball over. This team plays okay defense, turns the ball over a little bit, rebounds at an average rate, but can score out the wazoo. So I think USC is a dangerous team. They played well towards the end of the year, gave a couple scares to Arizona and UCLA. They're used to playing high caliber players. Or high caliber teams. Excuse me. I think they have the talent to pull this off. But I'm gonna go with Izzo. I got Michigan State moving on.
So I think you said the trio of guards that you love, and I'm gonna echo that 110%. Izzo is a mastermind when it comes to having his team ready to go for the tournaments, especially when you have a group of core guys who know his system and have been there for 4 or 5 years at this point, like Walker and like Hauser. So I love them in this matchup against USC. I think Michigan State rolls.
The next one, Marquette versus Vermont, the Catamounts.
Marquette's one of those teams that I really wasn't expecting them to. I wasn't expecting them to win the Big East. Like, I'll say that. I'm not going to say they came out of nowhere. They always have a competitive basketball team. But when you have teams like, obviously, Nova, this was a down year for them, but Creighton and Providence and UConn, like teams that we've been high on this season, I was not expecting Marquette to emerge out of all that chaos and end up on a 2 line. Like if you would have said before the year that Marquette was going to be a 2 seed and win the Big East, I would have looked at you like you had a third eyeball. So I got to give Marquette a lot of credit for how they've played so far this season.
Can't disagree with any of it. I still don't know if they belong on the 2 seed on the 2 line. But that being said, I believe they were 16-1 at home. And they took care of business at home when everybody came to town, including UConn, Villanova, Creighton, all those guys. Um, I think as a whole, I just think the Big East was down this year, and that's where I struggle here. You know, but on the same hand, I'm very high on UConn, who we'll talk about in a couple minutes. It's so I do have to give Marquette some kind of credit, like they won that conference. Um, another guy who's had a ton of success, in March, Shaka coaches Marquette. I don't think they have any problem here with Vermont, who is a very good team. I've randomly watched Vermont play like 3 times this year for random reasons. They're a good, solid team. I don't think they're gonna give Marquette that much trouble. Again, I think it's probably 4, 5, 6 point game at halftime. I think Marquette pulls away in the second half. We'll talk about Marquette a little bit more, as we come back down to them. But I'm Marquette here.
Yep, I got Marquette as well. I mean, I don't think that'll be necessarily a close one. So let's go ahead and move back up to the round of 32 here. We both got Purdue and Memphis.
We do. I have Purdue moving on here. I think it's the tale of two of the hotter teams coming into the tournament. When it's all said and done, I think Purdue's got the big man. I think that's going to be enough to get by Memphis. I think Purdue has the depth and enough scoring depth, on top of everything else, to get by Memphis. I think Memphis gives them a really good game, but I do think Purdue makes the Sweet 16.
Agreed. I don't love that Purdue team, and I haven't been too high on them all season. But I will say they go as Zach Edey goes, and
Yep.
you have to, if you want to stop Purdue, you have to either get Edey in foul trouble or they have to shoot the ball terribly, and Edey goes off for 30, but no one else is giving him any help. And I just don't think Memphis has an answer for Edey, so I like Purdue to move on.
Next game. This is depending on who you pick in this game, I think is kind of a little bit telling of which direction you're going, with maybe coming out of this quarter. Duke versus Tennessee. We both have that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm going to go with Tennessee here. I think Tennessee is going to be able to play man. I think they match up very well with Duke. Duke's strength by far is not their defense. And Tennessee is a top 5 or 6 defensive team in the entire country. I think they frustrate Duke enough. And again, I think this is where Duke's youth comes into play a little bit. I think they frustrate Duke, and I think Duke gets a little out of rhythm. I think John Shire gets a little frustrated probably coaching. I'm going with Tennessee in a nail biter. This one might come back to bite me, but I think Tennessee moves on.
See, I think this is the game where you really notice the lack of Zakai. I think Zakai not being there, it turns this game for me. If Zakai is there, I'm probably picking Tennessee in this one, but he's not. And I just don't think that they have figured it out enough for them to beat a Duke team that's playing great basketball right now. So I'm rolling with Duke here. I think this game's going to be close, but I like Duke to move on. I really do. And it's just, again, crazy to say, because if you asked me 2 weeks ago, there's no way that I have Duke making it to the Sweet 16.
I agree with you on that. I mean, the turnaround Duke has made has been, somewhat incredible, to be honest. They went undefeated at home.
Yep. And to me, though, it's not even just this run that they've gone on. Because, of course, like the numbers look great, wins in the win column. But just watching them play basketball, like watching them against the ACC championship game, it really opened my eyes to Duke. Like they play with such high energy and they play off of each other so well.
Yep.
Like I can see them going on a run here.
I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, they made that switch, and it seems to completely transform the offense. It's a lot more free flowing. They look more dangerous. They're more well balanced. Again, I mean, I'm almost talking myself out of this pick, but um, Duke just has looked like a completely different team in the last 3 weeks. Kentucky versus Kansas State. I believe we both have that as well.
Yep.
I'm gonna go Kentucky here, and I'm gonna tell you this: if this game is in the high 50s or the low 60s, I would say Kentucky's probably in a lot of trouble.
Yep.
I think this game has to be upper 60s, low mid 70s. I think that means Kentucky scoring, and I think Kansas State's got to come out of their. Kansas State likes to play slow, so they are a team that does not necessarily love pushing the basketball. They don't love playing a lot of pace, but they are very deadly out of a half court set. They are very efficient offensively in half court sets. So I think if Kentucky can control pace of play here, get out and run, force a little bit, hit a couple threes early, I think that's all hugely advantageous for Kentucky to start the game that way. I'm going to take Kentucky here to get by Kansas State.
I'm going to take Kentucky as well. I mean, you made all the great points for me. And I think, I talked about it before with, big time players. They make big time plays in the tournament. I think that's what you're going to see from Oscar Tshiebwe. He's been on this Kentucky team in the past, and they've had higher expectations. This year, I think they're kind of playing with house money. They have the Kentucky moniker. So, of course, teams are going to think, and, outside people are going to think that this team should have national championship aspirations. But I don't think no one is seriously considering Kentucky to be, one of those top 4 teams when it's all said and done. So I think they're going to play with a chip on their shoulder, and I think Tshiebwe and company is going to have enough to get it done against Kansas State, move on to the Sweet 16.
Next game, I think has the potential to be a great game. I think it's kind of a cat and mouse game. Um, Michigan State versus Marquette. Izzo versus Shaka Smart. I'm going to go with Marquette here. Um, a little bit against my gut, but I think Shaka. I think Shaka's coach this year. To your point earlier, I think he's coached kind of like he had something to prove. He had that rise to stardom at VCU with getting a lot of results out of kind of 2-3 star kids, and then he went to Texas and had all the resources and the recruits in the world, and couldn't get it done there. Got fired and went back to the Big East and Marquette, and now he's being very successful. Um, I think the one weakness Marquette has is rebounding, and they're a little bit, I don't want to say small, but they're not overly big in the paint. When opponents get close, they have one of the best shooting percentages against Marquette in the country. Problem with that is I don't think Michigan State has the guys to expose that. We already talked about the 3 guards they have; they're guard heavy, and I think Marquette matches up well with that. I think Marquette is going to do enough, offensively. Like I said, this isn't a typical Tom Izzo team. They're not great defensively, so I think Tyler Kolek, who is the point guard for Marquette, he was up for Player of the Year in Big East. A lot of people compare him to Steve Nash. Thank God Gene's not here because we'd probably go off on a tangent right now. But he's that type of player. Very crafty, can shoot, great vision, great passer. He as that offense goes, he goes. So I'm going to go Marquette in a really close one, and a really like if you're a basketball fan, I think this is you're going to love the way this game's played.
So I got the upset here. I like Michigan State over Marquette. I think Marquette is one of those teams that obviously playing great ball. They won their conference tournament. I think Michigan State, though, is a team that I don't want to say knows what it takes, but they have these players that have been in the tournament before and have this experience, and they know what it's like to play a game two days later in this kind of environment. I think this Marquette team, they're ahead of schedule. Like I don't think anyone had Marquette being as good as they were this year. And as good as you are, we know in the tournament, all it takes is that one day. And I think all the experience that Michigan State has, I think it's going to prove dividends for them. And I like Michigan State to pull off the upset and make it out the weekend.
All right. Cottrell's got Izzo working his magic again. So we're going to go. I have Purdue, Tennessee. You've Purdue, Duke. So who do you got winning?
I got Duke. I think
Oh man,
I think
fully on the Duke train.
this is where Zach Edey meets his match. Talked about Filipkowski earlier. I think that is a perfect matchup for Duke. All you have to really worry about is just not getting in foul trouble. Obviously, Edey is phenomenal. Like I want to get rid of the narrative that he's just tall, because when he first came into school, he was just tall. But now he's actually a skilled player, and he has some moves to him, and he does great work now. So I don't want to take anything away from Edey, but I just think this is the matchup where, hey, you can fight fire with fire here. And I think Duke has enough to get it done against this Purdue team.
So I don't disagree with anything you said. I also want to also jump on the back of what you said about Zach Edey. That kid's worked his ass off the last 4 years. And again, if you're not familiar with him, or you're not, me and Cottrell are familiar with him because he plays for Purdue. He's in the Big Ten. So I do remember when he was a freshman. He played 10, 12 minutes a night. He would kind of like run into people, and he was kind of
Yep.
like, I don't want to say clumsy, but like, again, when you're 18 and you're that big, like your body's not all like fully synced up yet. So
Yep.
um, that's not the case now. I mean, he's a good basketball player. He really is. And for all everything you hear about him, he's a great kid. So I think that cat and mouse game between him and Filipowski will be very interesting if your matchup comes to fruition, because Edie, I think, will punish him down low offensively, but he cannot guard Filipowski outside either on the other end. So I think that'd be very intriguing to watch. I'm almost rooting for you to be right and for my bracket to blow up. So um, I'm going Tennessee over Purdue. Um, and for one of the things I think you just said, I think they can almost allow. I think Tennessee is good enough defensively on the perimeter to really limit anything else Purdue does besides Zach Edey. I think you can let Zach Edey have 30, and I think uh, I think they can get enough stops defensively and put enough pressure on the guards of Purdue on the perimeter to get enough stops. And I think they're deep enough, offensively to get scoring across the board. I think Tennessee ekes one out over Purdue. I think Purdue goes home. I think they're the first one out.
Okay. Okay.
Down low, I have Kentucky, Marquette. You have Kentucky, Michigan State.
I do.
Go for it.
So in this one, I got Kentucky moving on. Um, Obviously, I talked about how much I love the senior led teams, especially when they're guards. But I think Kentucky, them having a force like Oscar Shibwe, I mean, you saw this matchup earlier in the year, and you saw how that went. So it was a very tight game, and when they played at Madison Square Garden. But and I know this was forever ago, but I got Kentucky winning this matchup.
Um, I have Kentucky as well. And I mentioned in my first breakdown of Marquette, they really struggled defensively down low and rebounding. I think Oscar Schwebe is going to have an absolute day when they play them. I think Kentucky is very long and athletic in the front court, and I think Marquette is going to struggle to corral those guys with rebounding and second chance points. I think Kentucky rolls there. I have Kentucky going to the Elite Eight.
Nice, nice, nice. So then we got a matchup. I got Kentucky versus Duke, and you got Kentucky versus
Tennessee,
Tennessee.
all SEC matchup for me.
You- Rocky Top.
Rocky Top versus Big Blue. They played twice this year. I think they split. I would have to go back and look at that, or maybe Tennessee won both. Um, Again, I think this is almost. I'm going with patterns here, So I think this almost. I think Tennessee could play Kentucky almost how they would play Purdue. I think they can let Oscar Schwebe kind of do his thing, and go off a little bit, and I think they can lock down everybody else on Kentucky's team. Kentucky's very good when they can get out and run and get the shots they want to get. Again, not a great half court team. They don't take the best shots. They get very turnover happy sometimes. And I think the depth of Tennessee and I think the experience of Tennessee gets it done. I think Tennessee makes this miraculous Final Four run. I think everybody's counting them out um, with Zakai being out, and I think they rally. I think they get it done.
Interesting, interesting, interesting. So I'm with you in the sense that I think Kentucky loses this game, but so that means I got Duke moving on, going to the Final Four for the second year in a row, and I would say that last year we knew that Duke was good, but I don't think we were expecting a Final Four run out of them, and I think we get another unexpected Final Four run again. So I I I really think that Duke's going to move on here. So it seems like the winner of our Duke Tennessee matchup, whoever wins that, I think we both would agree we expect them to go on to the Final Four then.
Correct. So I have for that side. I have Alabama versus Tennessee. You have Alabama versus Duke.
Correct.
All
Correct.
right.
Correct. Correct.
So we're
Now
going
we're going down
Midwest.
to
Are
the
we?
Midwest, and this is obvious for obvious reasons. My favorite bracket, favorite side of the bracket.
So first off, we will go with Houston versus who's Houston playing?
Northern Kentucky.
Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky, thanks for coming. Please don't forget your gift baskets, and all your tournament swag that you get. It's been a great season. This is where it ends. Kentucky, I think, comes out full force, uh, clamps down defensively. Houston wins by a lot.
Uh, I I think this is probably going to be the most interesting 116 matchup. I,
Ooh,
I think Houston wins this one, but I think you notice that since and I get it, this is a lot different than your conference championship game against a Memphis team. Much different. But this is such a quick turnaround from losing Marcus Sasser to injury, and I think I think Houston struggles a little bit early. I think they pull it out late, and it ends up being one of those 15, 20 point wins. But I think this one you'll see Houston struggle a little bit in the Horizon League. Northern Kentucky they're pretty solid. So um, unexpected. Youngstown State was the favorite to win that conference, but Northern Kentucky went on a run. They took out Youngstown State in that conference. So I think Northern Kentucky can give Houston a little run for their money. And I know we're going to get down to Kent, and I'm not saying Northern Kentucky is anything like Kent, but we saw Houston struggle with smaller school earlier in the year a little bit. So I think Houston they'll have a little problem. I don't think they'll take Northern Kentucky that serious. So I think they start off slow.
have we heard anything definitive one way or the other? Sasser's going to play in that first game
It
because I
doesn't seem like it. Doesn't seem like he's going to play.
I mean, I think they can win the game without him. So
Oh yeah. I don't think they'll be in jeopardy of losing this one, but I think this will be a tight one, and you'll have people tuning in the second half because 17 minutes to go in second half. It's like Houston's only up by 8. What's going on here? I think it's going to be one of those kind of games.
this next game, I could tell you point blank, I don't know what to make of it. I could give you 5 reasons why each team would win. Uh, I saw I saw Iowa a couple weeks ago go into Indiana and
Blow the
just
doors off
absolute
of them.
just boat race them in Assembly Hall, which is not an easy thing to do. And then the next and 2 nights later, I believe they lost to like Penn State or Northwestern, somebody like that. Don't get me wrong, a tournament team, but they went home to Iowa and they got their doors blown off. Auburn's been the same way. I've seen them play well this year, and I've seen other games where I'm like, this team shouldn't be in the tournament. So that being said, I'm going to go with the team that scores more easily. Iowa plays a very free-flowing, shoot-first type of offense. Um, I think Iowa, they're very efficient offensively. They don't play great defense. They never have. It's not a staple of who they are. So never has been, but they can shoot. And if they're shooting lights out, they're very difficult to beat. They're one of the top scoring teams in the entire country. They average over 80 points a game. they're going to score. So that being the biggest reason for me, I don't think Auburn can keep pace and get up into the 80s comfortably. So I'm going to go with Iowa to advance.
I hear everything you're saying. Mine might be a little biased. Every time I pick Iowa to do anything to disappoint me, it's
Bro,
like
I feel you.
they hate playing in March Madness tournaments. Like that's just not tailor made for their game. So I'm going with Auburn here, just because I've never had faith in Auburn before and had to lose it. So Iowa's burned me, at least 3 years now in the NCAA tournament. So I'm going with Auburn just because I trust them a little bit more, and that's just because I trust Iowa at this point like 2%. So I think
I
Auburn
can't.
moves on.
I can't argue anything about what you said. I think Chris Murray will be the best player in the game for
Of
Iowa.
course, yeah.
He's a borderline lottery pick. One of the best players in the tournament. Nobody's talking about because of all the big guys. But
Yeah, and
um,
he really gets overshadowed because obviously his brother Keegan was there last year, and
correct.
you know how special Keegan is. So
I was going to get into that. If the name sounds familiar, thinking of Keegan Murray. I mean, from the looks of it, he's almost as good. So that's the reason I'm taking Iowa. I'll probably bag on my face for all the reasons Cottrell just told you because they burned me more than enough times as well for me to be stupid enough to keep picking them. But I still don't have any faith in Auburn either. So flip a coin game.
understood. My favorite
Next,
5-12 matchup right here.
see, you know what? You know what's funny? I'm gonna let you go first because you said that. Out of all the 5-12s, this was the one I felt. I want to say most confident that there wouldn't be an upset, and then I kind of started digging into it, and now I don't feel that way. But I'll let you go first. Miami versus Drake.
So Drake was a team that when I rattled off my small schools the past few weeks, Drake was one of those teams, and they were kind of on the bubble, and it took them winning their conference tournament to get in, and I love Drake in this matchup here. Miami's one of those teams. Like, yes, I get it. They were at the top of the ACC during the regular season, but there's nothing that Miami's done that seriously impressed me. I love the way that Drake plays basketball. They're gonna be a scrappy bunch, and they're gonna shoot the ball. Not only are they gonna shoot the three, they're gonna shoot it well. They're a very efficient team, and they're led by Tucker DeVries. So I really think this Drake team they'll have what it takes to put Miami on upset alert. And I got Drake moving on.
So I'm gonna go against you here. I'm gonna stick with Miami, but I do think this is a very close game. Omar Amir, who is Miami's best forward, got hurt in the ACC tournament. I think his status is still a little bit up in the air. If he does play, he's not going to be 100%. Isaiah Wong and Jordan Miller are the two returnees from last year's team that went to the Elite Eight, kind of on a surprising run. They are. I think Miami's one of those teams that doesn't do anything that wows you, kind of like to your first point that you made. So they're not gonna blow. You're not gonna watch them and get blown away by like how well they pass or how fast they are or anything like that. They're just a solid team. They do everything. They don't do anything great, but they do everything very good. So you got to come out and put out kind of a special effort to beat them. Is Drake capable of doing that? Absolutely, 100%, absolutely. I'm going to go with Miami to get it done in a very close game, and it'll be another game. By no means will I be surprised if Drake wins. I heard somebody this morning say this could be the first year in a long time that all 12s win, and it's kind of hard to argue against that, to be honest.
Agreed.
Next up, we're going. I'm just going to announce the teams, and I'm going to let Cottrell go. Number 4, Indiana. Number 13, the MAC champions, the Kent State Golden Flashes. Cottrell, have at it.
So this is a matchup that I really hate. I love that I'll be able to see it. Obviously, Indiana has one of the best players in the country, Trace Jackson Davis. He's absolutely incredible. I personally think he is the second best player in the country, right behind Brandon Miller. Obviously, Edey's up there as well. I think Edey's probably going to win the Wooden Award, and it's going to be deservedly so. But I think Jackson Davis, like he's just one of those players that's truly special, and it feels like he's been in Indiana for forever. Not really one of those guys to get love because the Indiana teams have been underperforming in the past, but this year he's willed them to, you know, a great record and being a 4 seed this year. On the Kent State side, the thing that Kent does well is they don't turn the ball over and they play exceptional defense. They got Malik Jacobs, who's top 3 in the countries in steals. Um, they they do a great job of limiting possessions, and they're led by Sincere Carey, who was the MAC Player of the Year last year. So for Kent, they only go 8 deep. I've been going back and forth in this one. I think Indiana has the best player on the court. The spread being 4, though, for me, it tells me everything I need to know. Vegas thinks this game's going to be tight. I'm going with Kent. I'm going with Kent.
Roll with them. I love it. So listen, before Indiana got smacked in the Big Ten tournament, I would have loved Kent State here. Riding high, coming off the MAC championship. Indiana, maybe you catch them, you know, feeling themselves a little bit. The fact that they lost and the way they lost flipped this for me a little bit. You know, me and you've talked at length about how you have to, you know, the biggest thing for me in the NCAA tournament is if you have 2 guards that can play, you have a shot to beat anybody. Guard play is so important in college basketball.
Yep.
And Kent State's got 2 great ones. You already mentioned them. Sincere Curry, Malik Jacobs, both very, very good. When you watch them play, you'll probably shake your head and ask how you never heard of either one of them before. They're both very good. To Cottrell's point, MAC is Kent State's a great, solid team. They just don't do anything to hurt themselves. They led the MAC in scoring defense, steals, block shots, and defensive field goal percentage allowed. They are dogs on the defensive end. You go to Indiana, you know, you already talked about Trace Jackson Davis. He's going to be a lottery pick next year. You know, again, some people will tell you he's the best player in the country. I mean, you can make an argument for it. The big guy that came out of nowhere for them was Jalen Hood-Schifino. And he's played like a superstar the last month and a half. I am going to go. I literally don't even want to say because I'm literally doubting it as we sit here. I'm gonna go Indiana. I will tell you, I will be so happy for you if Kent State wins, and I won't be surprised at all. I think this is just like the South. I think it's very, very likely that both the 12 and the 13 could win in this corner of the bracket. So that's fun to me because like I said, I think chaos is great for the tournament. So I'm going Indiana very close. Like Cottrell said, Vegas is telling you everything you need to know. And I'll be the first person to text you and congratulate you if they win. So for your sake, I hope they win. Next game, Iowa State and Pittsburgh. Iowa State is maybe one of the biggest Jekyll and Hyde teams in this tournament, and I say that because they change by the week, almost by the game. Pittsburgh had a pretty decent start to the year, and they're another one. They kind of went on a run at the end of the year. Neither one of them, they're not really flashy teams. Iowa State's very good defensively. Pittsburgh's probably the better offensive team. But that being said, I'll go Iowa State, just being a little bit more battle tested in the tougher Big 12 this year, and I'll go Iowa State, and probably not a very eye appealing game to watch.
Agreed. I got Iowa State in this one. I don't think it'll be a fun one, but I think Iowa State wins.
Xavier and Kennesaw State. Xavier, one of the better teams out of the Big East. Kennesaw State, I don't think has been in the tournament in like forever.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think like 40 years or something like that.
I know it was something like that. Somewhere in there. It's kind of another one. I think Xavier is a solid team. Again, they play good defense. They do a lot of things well. They're not gonna blow you away, or they're not gonna be super eye appealing. I'm gonna go Xavier here to advance though pretty easily.
Yep, I got Xavier as well. Keeping it simple. Let's roll.
Texas A&M, Penn State. I would have told you, a month and a half ago. I don't know if either one of these teams even make the tournament, and now they're two of the hotter teams kind of coming into the tournament. I'm going to go local here. I think Penn State. I think Penn State has a better offense, and that for me is why. I think Texas A&M, really really relies on their defense, and they're good defensively. I just think Penn State. I think Penn State's offense is way more dynamic, and they're just going to score even against that defense. I think they're going to score more easily than Texas A&M will. So I think Penn State pulls the mini upset, and wins a close game.
I'm taking A&M here. I've flip flopped this pick multiple times. I might even change it before the bracket gets officially done at noon tomorrow. But I'm rolling with A&M here. I think A&M going on the run that they've gone on. I was actually kind of surprised they ended up a 7th seed. I thought they might go a little higher. Like if you put them on the 6th line, I wouldn't be surprised. Like if you flop them in Iowa State, I wouldn't have been that surprised at all in this region. But I think Penn State just got a bad draw here. Penn State's hot. I don't see them beating A&M.
Last game, I don't think we've talked too much about Colgate. Very good, very good team by any means. Texas is one of the best teams in this tournament, though.
Yep.
Deep, a lot of size, a lot of scoring, a lot of defense. I'm going Texas big.
Yeah, Texas. One thing about Colgate, we said it in years past. Every time Colgate's in the tournament, it seems like they win their conference. They win the Patriot League pretty much every year. At this point, kind of feels like Colgate shoots the three at an insane rate. If they're hot, they're going to be a tough team to beat. No matter, I know Texas is great. I don't see that being the case. This isn't one of the better Colgate teams, but you kind of got to be weary because that Colgate team, they'll put the ball in the bucket. But I got Texas here. I don't think this was going to be relatively close.
I think Colgate was a little bit of got a little unlucky because I think if they're not facing Texas, I think if Colgate gets on a 14 line somewhere,
Yep.
I think they might be matched up against a team they could beat. But yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with everything you said. So I got Houston versus Iowa. I have Houston winning fairly comfortably. I think, like we talked about earlier, I don't think Sasser plays the first game. I think this is when you see Sasser. Iowa is they're going to play right into the strength of Houston. Houston's going to guard that team man to man, play them out in the perimeter, make them work for everything. And then I think Houston is more than physical and more than efficient enough to score on Iowa. So I have Houston relatively comfortable.
Nice. I have Houston as well. Houston over Auburn. I don't think this game is going to be much of a game here. The 8-9 matchup here. I don't see any worry for Houston. Whoever makes out that first matchup, I think Houston rolls.
Next for me, I have Miami and Indiana. I'm gonna have Indiana moving on here. Already talked to them, talked about at length after breaking up the Kent State game. I have a feeling you're probably going to do the same thing I'm doing here. I'm going to have Indiana beating Miami and sending the Hurricanes home. I think Indiana's offense is just going to be, again, I think Miami does everything very well. Indiana has one of the better offenses in this entire tournament with one of the best players. So I think they make enough plays down the stretch. I think Indiana advances to the Sweet 16.
And then on my side, I got Drake versus Kent State. I got Kent. I think in a matchup of small schools, I would trust Kent a little bit more here. But I will say, the winner of that Indiana Kent game, I would have them going to the Sweet 16. But for me, it's Kent, and I think that sets up a rematch from a matchup that we saw earlier this year with Houston and Kent State. And it was a 5-point game, and it was a great matchup. So I'd love to see it again. I would love to see it again.
What
It's not midnight yet for Cinderella.
Did you look at Kent State's odds to make the Sweet 16 by any chance?
I did not. Now
it's got to be pretty decent. You might want to sprinkle some money on that. Next for me, I got Iowa State versus Xavier, I believe.
Yep.
I'm going to go Iowa State here. Again, Xavier is a team that I think is very comfortable in the low 60s, mid 60s. Iowa State is as well. I just like Iowa State's defense better. I like Iowa State, playing in all those close games in the Big 12. I think they're a little bit more battle tested. I'm going to go with Iowa State to get it done.
So I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I think Xavier would be comfortable if this game gets in the 70s. I think Xavier is very happy, and I think that's going to be Iowa State. Xavier is a team that averaged 81 points a game this year, and I think if they put on that caliber performance against that Iowa State team, who is definition of Jekyll and Hyde, so I think Iowa State might look great open, that first game. The second one, then maybe they're a little bit complacent and doesn't really settle in for them. So I like Xavier to make it out and go to the Sweet 16.
And then the bottom, Penn State versus Texas. I think this is kind of, Penn State. This is good for the program. They got to the tournament. They're a little bit more consistent than they have been in years past. They won a game this year. I don't think they match up with Texas well at all. Again, I love Texas's front court, their length. All three of those guys can score down low. They have good guard play. Penn State, I think, is just overmatched everywhere across the board here for the most part. I like Texas to move on to the Sweet 16.
I like Texas as well, whether it be A&M or Penn State. Love Texas. I just think Texas is one of those complete teams, and Texas is going to be one of those teams that we talk about serious title contenders.
So next marquee matchup for me, I have Houston versus Indiana. Seen a lot of people have Houston, and as far as the championship game, winning it. A lot of people love Indiana coming out of here as well. I'm going to go with Houston. Again, I think this is a week and a half away, so I think Sasser's a week and a half more healthy. I think Houston has the defense to contain Indiana and slow them down a little bit. Not stop them by any means, but I think they're going to. I think they're going to do enough to get enough stops against Indiana. I think this is the first real good test for Houston. Won't be shocked if Indiana wins, but that being said, I'm going with Houston's experience and Houston's defense. I have them going to the Elite Eight.
So my matchup here is going to be Houston, the rematch of Houston and Kent State.
Does he do it?
As much as I would love to put Kent State in the Elite Eight, I just can't do it here. I think Kent has the ability to win that game. I saw how close that first matchup was, but I think they kind of got the shock factor out of the way already. Again, I think Houston is one of those teams, like, I don't know why they would think this, but I think Houston is one of those teams like, hey, we're a smaller school. We don't have to take everybody serious. We don't have to play our best game to win. You kind of already got that against that Kent team. So that's out the way. They know what Kent can bring to the table, and I think they try to jump on Kent right out the gate. And that Kent team, I've seen them play a lot this year. They hardly ever struggle to score. And in that game, they were struggling mighty heavily. So I think Houston is just a team that drags them to those muddy waters. And I got Houston moving on to the Elite Eight.
I think them playing as great as it was for Kent State to get that experience and play a big team like that, I think them having familiarity with them actually hurts Kent State there if that ends up becoming the matchup. I think if they hadn't played this year, I think I actually like Kent State's chances even more, to be quite honest with you.
Yep, agree.
So my Elite Eight, I got Houston versus Texas. This is going to kind of be I went back and forth on this a lot. It's kind of put you between a rock and a hard place per se. I think I just for some reason is critical as of them I am sometimes, and as high on Texas as I've been sometimes. I just like Houston's experience here. I like the guys that have been through this a couple times already, and I think this is kind of Houston finally kind of gets their breakout win, and kind of really cements themselves as being one of the best teams the last 5 or 6 years in the country. Being consistent across the board. So I'm going Houston to win like a 69-68 game, a great basketball game. I think they advance past Texas, and they punch their ticket to the Final Four, which is in Houston. So I think it gets interesting.
That would get very interesting. I think you're gonna have obviously a team from Texas go to Houston. I just don't think Houston stays home to do it. I got Texas going to the Final Four. I love what they've done since obviously their coach got fired earlier this year for his off the court stuff. They really rallied around their interim coach. And I respect the hell out of that. Texas is a team also that scores 78 points a game. And I think, of course, Houston defensively, they're phenomenal. But I think this is a game where, you're gonna have to make tough shots at the end. I trust Texas just a little bit more. So I'm going with Texas here, and I got Texas going on to the Final Four for me.
All right.
Last,
Last bracket. So, in my opinion, as much as we think the East was a little bit unpredictable, I think the West is the toughest bracket, and I say that because there are a lot of people picking three separate teams to come out of this bracket, not only to make the Final Four, but win the entire thing. I think there's three bona fide teams that can win the national championship in here. And three of them, two of them, well, I've been high on three of them. The other two, we've all talked about liking a ton all year long. So um, it is this is an interesting bracket. We'll start with Kansas again, whitewashing Howard. Tons of experience, depth. Jalen Wilson is the other top five player in the country, and he plays for Kansas. Kansas by a gazillion against Howard.
yep, agreed. Kansas rolls. Rock chalk Jayhawk.
Rock chalk Jayhawk. Next game, I think it's a chance to actually be a good game. Illinois is too up and down for me. Arkansas started off terribly this year. Couldn't get out of the gate in the SEC, and they kind of finally found their game towards the back half of the SEC season. They got a couple guys that were in the tournament last year. They have a lot of experience. They're another team that loves their head coach. He's a fiery guy. Can't think of his name off the top of my head. Um, they play hard for him though. I like Arkansas to come out of that game.
I do as well. Arkansas is one of those teams. Obviously, they lost one of their best players, Nick Smith Jr., earlier this year, but he's back now, and they've kind of been, reacclimating him into the offense and things like that. And I think this is going to be a perfect time for them to go on a little run here. I think Illinois is a team that's I know they made the tournament, and no one was really expecting them to be great this year. I just don't. I think 9 may have been a little generous for Illinois. It's a team that I don't think is a serious threat here. I like Arkansas to win.
Next one, another upset alert, high alert. This is actually, believe it or not, I saw the stat today. Out of all the 12 versus 5s, this is the one that's being picked the most. VCU versus St. Mary's. St. Mary's looked like they were going to kind of finally get over the Gonzaga hump and
Yep.
and win the WCC this year. And they beat them in the regular season. I actually watched that game. It was a very good game.
It was.
And then they got to they got to the tournament time, and Gonzaga did what Gonzaga did and thumped
Beat the
them.
brakes off of them.
Yes,
Yeah.
they did. Wasn't much of a game, to be honest. VCU, again, one of these mid-major teams. They do everything well. They turn teams over, the fifth highest rate in the country. Very, very in-your-face, man-to-man, pesky defense. Get a lot of points off turnovers. I like VCU in this game a lot. I'm going VCU to win.
So I know this is the trendy pick here, and I know a lot of people are picking VCU. I got St. Mary's here. I think St. Mary's is one of those teams where they play phenomenal defense, and I get it. This is going to be a very ugly game. Like, if you're looking for an exciting game to watch this weekend, probably don't want to tune in to St. Mary's VCU until there's like 4 minutes left on the clock and things are more intense, because this isn't going to be one of those exciting games where you're screaming at the TV. I trust St. Mary's a little bit more. I've seen them play multiple times this year, especially when they beat Gonzaga in the regular season. So that really put me on notice for this St. Mary's team. I just think they ran into a buzzsaw at the end of that conference championship game. I don't think VCU is necessarily a buzzsaw. I see these teams very similarly, and I think St. Mary's does everything just a little bit better. So I'm rolling with St. Mary's here.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that game going either way. I think my one thing with St. Mary's is I've seen them struggle. They don't have a dynamite per se go-to guy when you need a bucket. They struggle to score sometimes, and I think if VCU can stay in that game and, like you said, get them into muddy waters, I think it's one of those games that anything could happen down the stretch. That being said, the next game, UConn versus Iona. Iona is turning, they're becoming a staple of March Madness now that Rick Pitino's there. It's the third straight year they've made it. Very good team, very solid team. They're playing a UConn team who is very dynamic, both offensively and defensively. I think UConn wins this game easily.
I got UConn easy as well.
TCU versus against either Arizona State or Nevada. I think TCU's winning no matter who they play. And I think they're winning comfortably no matter who they play. They've been a different team since what's that guard's name? I'm sure you know it.
Can't think of it.
Mike Miles Jr. Since he came back from injury, they've looked like a completely different team for TCU. So I like TCU again comfortably against no matter who wins that game.
Agreed. They tip off at 9 tonight. I'm sure I'll watch it after the show. But again, I like TCU no matter who they play. I think if they get Arizona State, I think that game can be very interesting. But I'm rolling with TCU.
Arizona State's scrappy. I will tell you that. Watching the Pac-12 the last couple of weeks, they've given Arizona and UCLA and even USC everything they wanted in all those games.
Yeah. Beat Arizona at the buzzer.
Yep. Gonzaga versus Grand Canyon. I would say this is, correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is one of the most underrated Gonzaga teams in the last couple of years. They've been number one the last couple of years and national title aspirations. And this year's team's kind of flown under the radar a little bit. I don't know if that helps or hurts them. Drew Timme is still in school somehow. I'm not sure how. I think he's been there for 8 years now. Yep. Grand Canyon is not a bad little team. I just don't. I think Gonzaga, to your point, earlier, I think Gonzaga is playing its best basketball of the year right now, which is always what you want to have going into the tournament. I think Gonzaga wins big.
So I agree. The one thing about Gonzaga, though, is that their conference outside of St. Mary's is absolutely awful. And, they played all their tough games early in the year, and they were up and down. They lost to Baylor. They lost to – who else did they lose to? They lost another bit. Texas. Texas was a big one that they lost to. They beat Kentucky. They lost to Purdue as well. They had a tight one against Xavier. They had a tight one against Kent. When you're going up against teams that are on an equal playing field as you, and I get it, this was 3-4 months ago, but I can't just completely forget about it because you play in a weak conference and then you beat up on St. Mary's at the end of the year. I think they won this game, but I do have question marks all over for Gonzaga. I don't know how good they really are.
I think it's fair. I think it's a very fair assessment. How good were all those teams they played 3 or 4 months ago? How much are better are they now? We've talked about Kentucky being up and down, Purdue. But I think it's a fair point. I think it's, for me, you anyway. Gene was all on board with Gonzaga last year, and that's always my gripe with Gonzaga. They play all these teams at the beginning of the year before you really know what those teams are, and they mature and they kind of really grow into their identity and what they are. And then Gonzaga goes out west and plays a bunch of really bad basketball teams.
Yep.
Comes into the tournament 30-3, and everybody wants to, say they're champion contenders. And usually, once they get into the Elite Eight or somewhere around there, and play a really good team from the Big 12 or the Big 10, they usually lose. So I feel the same way about Gonzaga. I don't think this team is anywhere near as good as last year's team. I'll say that.
No, absolutely not.
This next game, I think it's going to be a game. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's a game that probably nobody cares about unless you're a fan of either one of those teams.
Mm-hmm.
Like this game will be the one that's buried on the channel that nobody watches. But Northwestern versus Boise State. Boise State's not a bad little team, and you have Northwestern out of the Big Ten, who's got a couple really big wins this year. They beat Purdue. I think they beat Indiana. I know they beat Michigan at least once. But I like Northwestern to come out. I think they have a little bit more athleticism, and I like their offense a little bit better. They have more diversity in scoring. So I'll go with the Big Ten there. I'll go with Northwestern.
So I'm going to roll with Boise State here. I think we go a little bit of a upset here. What I like about Boise State is that their offense is super balanced. Like they got 6 guys who score double figures, and I really think that this Boise State team can give Northwestern all they can handle. I think Northwestern got the privilege of getting that 7 seed because they got hot at the right time, and they were in such a congested conference in the Big Ten. And so, I think they ended up as the 2 seed in the tournament. So I think that played a big part in them getting this 7 on the 7 line. And then Boise State not making it out to the conference championship game. I think that put them at the 10 seed here. But Boise State's a team that I really like. I think they beat Northwestern.
All right. So we differ there. This next game, I have UCLA. I think UNC Asheville kind of got a shitty seeding, to be honest. I think they're better than a 15 seed. I watched them play a couple times. They played in the conference this year that had 3 or 4 teams that honestly could have won it in, between them, UNC Wilmington, a lot of good teams that made the tournament, depending on who ended up winning it at the end. So I think UNC Asheville's scrappy. But again, playing UCLA, who is again one of the favorites to win the whole thing, I think UCLA wins big.
Yep, I got UCLA as well. I mean, we're going to get more into them, but I think they roll in this one.
So up to, I have Kansas versus Arkansas.
Arkansas and Kansas.
Yeah, Gene's favorite, Arkansas. I'm going Kansas here. Again, Jalen Wilson. Arkansas just really, really struggles to score sometimes. They're not a great outside shooting team. I think Kansas just has too much. They're just better at every facet of the game. So I'll take Kansas to advance.
This is a game that I struggled on. I really wanted to dive into it. I'm going with Arkansas here.
Ooh!
I think Kansas is going to be the first 1 seed out of this tournament.
Oh, my Lord.
The crazy thing about it, too, is that I think Kansas, it's just crazy to say, but I think Kansas is a legit title contender. I don't think Arkansas is really an 8 seed. Like, if they had been healthy all year, I think Arkansas would have been a team that we're talking about on the 4 line. And I think you getting that, your second matchup, is super unfortunate. Obviously, all the unknowns going around Bill Self. I don't know. Like, Arkansas has overcome all their adversity. Kansas is kind of dealing with it now. So, and Arkansas has 2 guys who are going to be lottery picks this upcoming year. So they have the talent to beat a team like Kansas. I think they're running into Kansas at the right time, and I got the upset happening.
It's a lot of good points, my man. It's a lot of good points. I wish you well on that one. But I don't know if I can co-sign that one. Next up for me, I have VCU versus UConn. I think the Cinderella run's a little early this year for VCU. Been high on UConn all year. I think UConn wins here and gets to the Sweet 16.
I got UConn over St. Mary's. Again, I think St. Mary's is one of those teams scrappy defensively. Obviously, they play great defense. I just think UConn is, again, a team that's on a 4 line, and I think they're legit title contenders. You want to look at all your advanced KenPom metrics, they check off every box for you. So I think UConn is a team they're going to be a tough out, and I think they take care of business against St. Mary's.
Next for me, I got TCU versus Gonzaga.
Same.
Again, I have TCU winning here. I think they're the better team. I think they played the better competition all year. This kind of gets back to the Gonzaga conversation we just had. I watched them play 2 games when Mike Miles Jr. was hurt, and then I watch them play the first 2 games he came back, and I mean I'm telling you, it is a night and day difference with that team. And that kid is a legit star, man. I love the way he plays. He plays a little chip on his shoulder. Again, he doesn't get quite the press as like Jalen Wilson or any of those guys, but he's damn good. As he goes, does TCU go? I think they have enough defense to slow Gonzaga down a little bit. I'm going TCU to advance.
We know we've harped on it so many times throughout the show. We know it's important here. Gonzaga's got 2 guys that are 9-year seniors in Timmy and Rasir Bolton. So I like Gonzaga here. I think they take care of business. I think they have it rolling at the right time of the year, and I think they get through TCU rather easy. I don't know if TCU has an answer for Drew Timmy.
Fair. Bottom for me, I have Northwestern versus UCLA. Not a lot of mystery here. I think this is way out of Northwestern's element. I think they can give them a good 10, 15 minutes. I think UCLA pulls away and wins comfortably and gets ready for the Elite Eight.
Agreed. I think UCLA. I think they roll Boise here. I don't see this game being too tight. Like I don't see an avenue of victory for Boise State in this one.
So that leaves me to Kansas and UConn. This one was tough for me. You know, I think you mentioned a little bit of the uncertainty surrounding Kansas right now. Bill Self said he's going to coach. He's back with the team. I love Jalen Wilson. I followed him a lot because originally he was committed to Michigan, and then he decommitted when John Beilein went to the pros, and he ended up in Kansas. And I was high on them last year, and I've been high on them from the get-go this year. UConn, however, is another team that I've been very high on. I think Jalen Wilson will be the best player on the court. I think UConn is going to be the best team on the court. I'm going with a little bit of an upset here. I have UConn knocking out Kansas in the Elite Eight.
Interesting. I have Arkansas knocking out UConn.
Man, you were high on Arkansas.
To go to the Elite Eight. It's not that it's. I'm big on talent, and I think again, I just think Arkansas is severely underseeded based on their talent. I 100% understand why they are where they are, just because they lost a lot of games while their guard was hurt, but I do like the Arkansas team.
All right, and the other one, I have TCU and UCLA. I think UCLA has too much talent for TCU across the board. TCU or UCLA is the sixth best scoring defense in the country. They did lose two of their better defenders, towards the end of the season that will not be playing in the tournament. And on top of that, they're not the deepest team in the country either. Ben Howland only plays like 7 or 8 guys, so they're a little thin right now. I think they have enough to get past TCU though. So I have UCLA going to the Elite Eight to face UConn.
I have UCLA moving on to the Elite Eight as well. I think we're going to get a rematch of the epic UCLA Gonzaga game from a few years ago, and I think UCLA flips the script this time around. Funny part about it is a lot of these guys were on both of these teams. We talked about Gonzaga having 9-year seniors. UCLA's got them as well. Tyre Campbell's been there since the Reagan administration. You got Johnny Juzang, still there. And I love their true freshman, Amari Bailey, as well. I think UCLA has a ton of talent, and they have the experience as well. I got them moving on to the Elite Eight versus Arkansas.
All right, so I actually changed this right before we went on air. Not gonna lie, I originally had UCLA for a lot of the reasons Cottrell just said. I think losing Jalen Clark, who is debatably their top defender, and also with them not being deep, I think that what scares me a little bit is what Cottrell also just said with them having all the experience that they do have with Johnny Juzang and all those guys. I think Ben Howland's a very underrated coach. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. Um, that being said, I'm going with UConn to go to the Final Four. I think across the board, I think they're deeper. I think they can match up talent wise with UCLA. And if UCLA gets in any kind of foul trouble at all in this game, which they could with UConn's bigs, I think they're in a lot of trouble. I think this is a great game. I think this has the potential to be one of the absolute best games in the entire tournament. I'm going UConn in a razor thin win to get to the Final Four.
Well, I got UCLA taking out those Arkansas Razorbacks. I just gave you a ton of reasons why I love UCLA, and I'm leaning on it again. Experience, and that's what UCLA has. Not only do you have the experience, you have the young guys like an Amari Bailey who can give you 25, 30 points on any given night. Now, obviously, that's not his average, but I saw him in the Pac-12 tournament have a 27, 28 point game. So I know what that team can do, and I think they get it done. They have the numbers offensively, they have the numbers defensively. I think they'll be fine. I think this is their region to lose.
All right. Final Four, baby. I have Alabama versus Tennessee and Houston versus UConn.
And then I have Alabama versus Duke, and then Texas versus UCLA.
All right. I will give my first one first, and you can do the other side first. Alabama versus Tennessee. I think Tennessee's going to go up against a team that plays defense just as good as they do. And I think Brandon Miller and company offensively is just going to be too much for Tennessee to overcome. I think they kind of, finally meet their matchup where, not having their full offensive team on the court and their repertoire is finally going to hurt them. I have Alabama and Brandon Miller advancing to the national championship game.
I have Alabama advancing to the championship game as well, but over the Dukies. I just think that's going to be a matchup where, again, when you have one of the best players in the country and Brandon Miller, person who I think is the best player in the country, I think that's going to shine bright in a game like that. I think Duke has what it takes to beat a team like Bama if they're playing their A game. Like, I definitely think they can beat that Bama team. The problem is that Alabama is truly never out of a game. They have the ability to go on a run whenever they want to. So I got Bama going to the championship game. And then on the other side, I can't say it enough. Experience. Give me UCLA taking out Texas to go to the championship game.
The other side for me, I'm going to have the hometown favorite, Houston Cougars, against the UConn Huskies. I think you have a matchup of two of the most physical, best defensive teams in the entire country. I think depending on how this game is officiated is huge because, again, I think both teams are very physical and they're very grab happy. Both these teams lead the top 10 in the country of sending their opponents to the free throw line. I'm hoping this is a game where, since they both play the same way, the refs just let them play because I don't want to see a free throw contest. That being said, I think playing in front of the home crowd could be a positive and it can be a detriment because I think the pressure starts to set in sometimes. I think UConn offensively is the more talented team. I think Sasser will be the best player on the court, but that being said, I think UConn's depth, they bring a 7-2 kid off the bench, for God's sake. I'm going to go UConn wins. I'm going to go UConn to the finals against Alabama.
All right, and then in the championship game, I have UCLA versus Alabama. I'm going to go with all the experience. I am taking UCLA cut down the nets in Houston over Alabama Crimson Tide.
So I wish Gene was here for this because he loves to tease me about it. You made a statement earlier about star players and star performances and shining the brightest when they have to. I think this is one of those situations where a lot of people don't think Brandon Miller should be playing. I think this is the ultimate spot for him to go out and just shut everybody up and have the final word and everything that happens in that story. Um, I think he goes out, and I think Alabama defensively can match up with UConn, and I think their offense is way more dynamic and they're a better shooting team. So I'm going with the Alabama Crimson Tide to cut down the nets, throw a little shade at Nick Saban and the football team maybe about winning a national championship. But I think Alabama cuts down the nets in Houston. Roll Tide.
All righty. That was a long March Madness.
Long March Madness. I will tell you this though. I've gotten 7 texts now saying that this was the most in-depth breakdown that they've watched on anybody's podcast so far. So that makes me happy. Gene is trying to listen. He said it's breaking up too much. Love you too, buddy. Get home safe. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. I hope you have a lot of fun. Gene's got Bama winning it all too, so roll Tide. That being said, we all have all 3 of us have Bama in the championship game, so go put a bunch of money on anybody else in that bracket.
Right.
So next we're gonna go to the NFL, and it has been, to say as exciting as March Madness has been, this has been one of the most active, free agency markets, to start off right out of the gate in a while for the NFL. Like bonkers.
Yep.
Cottrell would put something in the group chat, and I would go check Twitter, and by that little amount of time, I would check Twitter, and somebody else signed with somebody else. We couldn't even keep up with it, and there's still people out there. So, we're just gonna
I got a little list here.
Good Lord.
Top 22 guys that, contract wise, that have already signed deals. I was going to ask you, was there one that you were surprised by? Like, I know we talked about, like in our group, we talked about, of course, with the Eagles, Darius Slay being cut. It looks like, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is not going to get re-signed. James Bradbury.
Listen, I think a lot of people, my gut reaction was I was a little pissed off about Slay because I think he was the first. When Howie went and got him, Howie made a lot of waves with making that move. And I think he was kind of the first building block to making that defense good. And he kind of, really took on the position of being a leader on that defense and being vocal. He was very responsible when he had bad games and saying he had to be better a couple games, when he played against top wide receivers. And I think he played great. He missed a couple passes by an inch that if he breaks them up, we're talking a whole different story. And, balls were just thrown perfectly. But that being said, they went to restructure him. I think he saw the writing on the wall, and, he agreed to the restructure, but he wanted his money guaranteed. He's 32 years old. And, the one thing you have to give Howie credit through all this, all the time was, he tries not to sign older guys to long deals that are going to hurt the team. We've kicked a bunch of contracts down the road, and this is the year that we kind of knew it was either going to be this year or next year. We were going to kind of pay the piper for him. So he's going to be a casualty. We re-signed Brandon Graham. Jason Kelsey's back, which was great, which was huge.
Bradbury's back.
Bradbury is back. So I think the solution here is kind of obvious. I think they want to get Johnson. I don't think that's dead by any means. I think they're going to try to get that done, bring him back. And then, the luxury of having 2 first-round draft picks this year is I think you can spend one on whoever you want to. And then I think you're going to draft a corner, and I think a lot of people are, high on Joey Porter and making the local connection because he's a Penn State kid. And obviously, he's from Pittsburgh because of his dad. I personally agree with you. I think the kid from Illinois is better. I saw him play firsthand when Michigan played them this year in that close game when Blake Corum got hurt, and that kid had the game of his goddamn life. He was a wrecking ball on the field. He's a physical corner. He likes to come up and tackle in the run game, which I love. Um, so I think that's the play. I think they're going to try to re-sign Johnson if they can and draft a corner. And at that point, I can't say we're any worse for wear at that point. As a defense, Nakobe Dean we drafted. I saw some people being upset about TJ Edwards. Like, I mean, I don't know if you watched the Super Bowl. TJ Edwards got embarrassed in the Super Bowl. I'm not sure if anybody was paying attention to that, but Nakobe Dean was always drafted to be the starter this upcoming year in that position, and that's who's going to start. And and obviously, I'm okay with it. I mean, again, I don't want to see him go, but at the same time, it's the right football move, and I think you have to give Howie the benefit of the doubt there.
100%. I mean, and I agree. I think it's kind of telling though. You saw James Bradbury sign a team friendly deal to stay in Philly. Obviously, he was kind of damaged goods leaving out of New York. Philly gave him a chance, and he shined there. He had one of the best seasons of his career in Philadelphia, and he took a hometown discount for it. So I think if you can get, Gardner Johnson on a deal like that, then of course, that's going to be the route that you want to take. I just don't know if Gardner Johnson is that kind of guy to take a pay cut like that, I should say. People in New Orleans, they loved him there, and he was unwilling to do so there. So I don't know. Obviously, he had a chance to go to the Super Bowl this past year, and he knows that Philly's window right now is wide open as long as you figure out everything cap wise. But I just don't know if he's that kind of selfless guy. It wasn't like Philly gave him a chance when no one else would. Philly gave him a chance when New Orleans didn't want to pay him what they thought he was worth.
Yeah, I mean, I think New Orleans also knew the cap hell they were going to be in the upcoming year, and they were like,
Correct.
"There's no shot we're keeping him. So like, let's
Yep.
get something for him now." I think the
Yep.
Eagles are in a little bit better position there than the Saints were. But that being said, again, he doesn't have any. Like you said with Bradbury, like he's not like a local guy per se, but like the Giants cut him and they were like, dude, like we're not paying you to play football this year. And the
Yep.
Eagles took him and he had a great year. So I think there's a little bit of loyalty there with Bradbury. Um, like you said, Johnson's going to have plenty of suitors, but again, it's all these changes that are happening. You don't have one change on that Eagles offense. That entire offense, minus Miles Sanders, is coming back next year. So, like you said, that window's wide open. So if you want to play for rings, is it worth a couple $1,000,000 less a year to have a chance to win? To me, I mean, it's a no-brainer for me. But he's got to do what he thinks is best for his family and in his own pockets, and we'll see what happens from there.
Were there any other moves that kind of shocked you? I mean, for me, like free agency wise, I would say I was shocked by the Javon Hargrave. Obviously, I knew he was going to get paid. I was utterly shocked that he went to San Francisco just because I didn't think that they would spend that kind of money on a defensive tackle, and their defensive line is already absolutely insane. So that was like a big shock to me. The other one was Jesse Bates going to Atlanta.
Both on my list. Hargrave, I completely agree with you. I found it a little odd, like you said, that they decided to spend the money there on him on a position where they really didn't have,
A hole.
a hole per se, and they let Mike McGlinchey walk, which I thought was that was interesting to me. And he went to Denver and got signed right away. So that was definitely a little head scratching for me. I agree with you there. Jesse Bates, I think, unfortunately, I think this was all, kind of writing on the wall, even coming into this past year. Listen, we've talked about it numerous times about all these huge contracts that these quarterbacks are going to sign, and I don't think Jesse Bates had any kind of misrepresentation of the fact that they just weren't going to have money for him.
Yeah.
He got paid last year to play on the tag, and I thought that was smart to take his money. He then went to Atlanta and got paid. I mean, listen, Atlanta's on the team if they can draft well again this year and sign a couple more people. Like I don't think they're that far away as long as they can figure out the quarterback situation.
But that's a big thing though. Like I
Oh,
get
it's
it,
oh, it's
the South
it,
is wide open right now, but
it's
you
enormous.
you don't have a quarterback in a
No, you
division
don't.
where the Saints just went out and got Derek Carr. So I mean, I would say right now, I would assume that they would be the favorites in that division. But the division is still wide open. Like Carolina just went up and got the number 1 pick, so we know they're going to have a rookie quarterback who we think is going to be superstar caliber, whether it be Bryce or CJ. Maybe they won't be that right out the gate, but we know that talent is going to be there. So for
So
Atlanta,
yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, and I think, I mean, we'll see. I think they're going to try to hopefully be in on somebody. But I mean, that defense is going to get better.
of
I
course,
think that I think, I'm going to ask you something about the Carolina Panthers in a second because I have a theory on that. But how about your boy Baker signing with Tampa Bay today?
very interesting. I think that's a move where I think I don't be surprised if they draft a guy like Tanner McKee or Hendon Hooker in the second round to try and compete with Baker. I think it's going to be Baker's job to start. And I know they already got Kyle Trask there, but I think the Kyle Trask experiment is already over and it hasn't even started yet. So
I don't disagree with you. I just think it's funny that like a lot of people from Tampa though, like really thought that like they were going to give Kyle Trask a shot this year. Like apparently a lot of people inside the building are optimistic on him. So I'm curious to see how that goes. I think Baker is in a very um, he got a 1 year deal, and it's kind of I think he earned that deal with the way he played with the Rams at the end of the year last year, and I think he's got himself off life support per se in the NFL. He's going to go play on a very good offense. I mean, you don't get much better than throwing the ball to Mike Evans and Godwin. So
agreed. My one
he's
issue though, Tom Brady couldn't make it work last year. And I get it, Byron Leftwich isn't the OC anymore, so it's going to be a new offense. But again, this is going to be like Baker's 7th OC at this point, and he's only been in the league 5 years. So
yeah. I mean,
it's going to be tough.
it's not ideal. I mean, I think the biggest thing with Tom last year though was, I mean, the offensive line at that point, by the time they got in the playoffs, I mean, they were on their third string guy at 3 of the 5 positions.
Agreed.
Um,
Yeah.
and that is a big deal for a guy that can't move. I mean, Baker's still mobile enough that he can move around. So, um, I mean, again, I don't ever want to see anybody not succeed or not do well. So, I mean, I think the redemption story there for Baker would be kind of cool. And he's got a 1 year, 8 million, was it 8.5 million, something like that,
Yeah.
kind of show me deal. I think the other two huge things that surprised me, the Darren Waller trade to New
Yeah.
York for a third round draft pick, and not even a good one at that, like towards the bottom of the round. And the Gilmore trade to Dallas came out of nowhere.
Yeah. It did.
That is, I'm telling you, man, I don't, I don't want to even bring him into this discussion, but it's very hard for me to believe or have faith that Chris Ballard is actually calling the shots at Indy. And I, for as much, like, I mean, Chris Ballard won GM of the year a couple years ago, and is for some of the great moves he's made. And then you look at like Shaq Leonard, the second they trade him was right on Twitter again. It was like like
What's
damn,
going on here?
yeah, like what the hell are we doing? Like, you know what I mean? It's I think I'm telling you, I think they're losing people in that building, man. I mean, they've made a lot of really questionable mistakes from a team that 3 years ago, we thought was one bad loss away from, making it to the Super Bowl, and was in Buffalo driving with the ball, to knock them out of the playoffs, and with Phillip Rivers, and to where they are now, I think is wild.
Yeah.
So I mean, listen, Dallas definitely got better. And they re-signed Van Der Esch, and they're gonna go. I mean, it's almost like they're taking a page out of the Eagles playbook. They're gonna line up with, Tay Diggs and uh, Gilmore.
Gilmore.
Gilmore's
Yeah.
their corner. So they cut Zeke today though, which I found interesting. Um, I thought after Pollard got hurt, I thought he would definitely be on the team this year. and I thought that kind of saved him, and obviously not. So I mean, they're gonna go running back by rookie and committee until Tony Pollard's ready next year, coming off the.
I think though the one thing though too with the Cowboys is that Zeke wasn't. It seems like all the reports make it seem like Zeke was unwilling to restructure his deal. So the Cowboys were like, "Hey, we love you, but if you don't want to restructure, this is business deal. You're on the wrong side of your career at this point. We can't be paying you this amount of money for the production that you're giving us, even with a Tony Pollard injury." So I 100% understand it from Dallas' standpoint. I also think a fresh start for Zeke might be good. Going behind, not necessarily. I'm not going to just throw out names here, but going somewhere where he can be the number 2 back and be that essentially third down back. He's great in pass protection. He can catch the ball at the backfield. I think that'll actually be good for him instead of him being the bell cow. Obviously, in Dallas, the last couple of years, it's kind of been trending away from that with Pollard getting as many carries as he has been. But I think if Zeke can go to a team like, I don't know, let's say a team like the Saints. I know he won't go there because of cap reasons, but he can be behind a guy like Kamara or be behind a guy like Dalvin Cook. Like I think that'll be a good situation for him.
I 100% agree. I was Saints were one of the teams I was going to mention. I almost think like if he could go to a situation like that Detroit had last year
Yep, correct.
between Swift and Williams. I think if he can get in a situation like that and stay healthy, I think he can be very successful as long as he's, willing to get paid, kind of, what the going rate is for them. Um, but it'd be really interesting to see where he goes. There's still a lot of big names out there. I mean, there's a lot left to happen, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this again next week.
Of
Um,
course.
two more things I want to get to, and then we can hop on over to UFC. I want your opinion on the worst kept secret in the world was kind of let out of the bag today about Aaron Rodgers wanting to go to the Jets. There's conflicting reports on kind of what he said or what his demands were, or whatever. Um, Green Bay apparently came out though and said that they're trying to trade him, but they're not just going to let him go. How long do you think it takes before the deal's actually done? And what do you think Green Bay gets back for him?
I think it'll be before the draft happens. I think they will get back obviously some draft capital. I think maybe they can squeak out one first. I don't think it'll be more than one first though. I think Green Bay wants to move on from the Aaron Rodgers experience at this point. They have Jordan Love waiting in the wings there, so I think they try to part amicably. But I think a big part of it though for Green Bay, I would assume that they're going to say, "Hey, Jets, Aaron Rodgers is getting paid $50 million. Give us a first, maybe give us a player that an Elijah Moore or Denzel Mims, like a guy like that. Give us somebody young who's decent, and we want you to eat 35 of this $50 million that Aaron Rodgers is getting, and we'll call it a day."
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what becomes the interesting part. And when he signed that contract, like I think we all agreed, that there was no way he was finishing that contract in Green Bay, because I think we all knew Green Bay was going to kind of have the type of season that they had this year. He wasn't going to be happy. He was going to, do his diva stuff, which we all know he does. And here we are. I mean, I don't think anybody's surprised that we're talking about this tonight. That being said, that $50 million contract is an absolute roadblock to really get anything done easily in trading him. I mean, that is a
Yep.
lot of money. I think Green Bay, there's no shot Green Bay takes, like you said, any more than 10, like pays any more than 10 or 15 million. Like they want that off the books.
Yep.
Between not dealing with the headache of Aaron Rodgers, not paying that salary this year is huge for them, because then it allows them to rebuild rather quickly, spending that money.
Right.
Um,
I
how
think
do you
I was
how
going
do
to
you
say just real quick. I think the other thing too is that's interesting is the Jets. I've been saying it, and I've been saying it, and I've been saying it. I said it when Justin Fields is having his incredible season. If Justin Fields was in New York, I thought they could have been title contenders last year. I said it on the after our Super Bowl special when we talked about our predictions for next year. I said I would have the Jets versus the 49ers because I thought the Jets, they realized that they were legit a quarterback away. I love how aggressive the Jets have been. Obviously, they had the great draft picks when you draft the offensive and defensive rookie of the year, but you go out and make a splash like this, and not only do you make the splash, but you bring in Nathaniel Hackett as the OC, which is that's the smart way to do it. If Denver was smart, they would have tried to find a way to bring in a legit head coach and say, "Hey, Nathaniel Hackett, leave Green Bay, come over here, be our OC." Would have been the smart way to do it. But the Jets did it the right way. I love what they're doing, and I think they're legit on the up and up, and I see them being serious Super Bowl contenders now.
Oh no, I agree. I mean, I think if they get Aaron Rodgers, I think they're the favorite to win the East, and I don't think it's relatively close at that point. You know, you have Buffalo. Lost their debatably their best linebacker in free agency. He went to the Bears. They did re-sign Poyer today. I saw. I know they freed up a bunch of money because they restructured Diggs as well. So I mean, I think they're going to try to go out and do something as well. But
The
uh,
other team, though, Dolphins traded for Jalen Ramsey, third rounder
yeah,
for Jalen Ramsey, and
yeah,
I know Gene's going to argue that he's cooked, but I mean, if you look at the numbers and look at the full tape, I mean, he was a top 10 corner last year. Any way you slice it, he was a top 10 corner last year. You only give up a third and you get him on that talented team. I mean, I think Miami, it's going to come down to how healthy is Tua and what kind of insurance plan do they have if Tua's not right towards the end of that year.
I think my problem is I don't think Tua is going to be right. I think Tua is going to be very hit happy per se. Like I don't think he's going to want to take any contact.
Yeah.
I think he's going to throw the ball earlier than he should because he doesn't want to get hit. But that being said, I mean, and this isn't a positive trait for Jalen Ramsey by any means. Don't get me wrong, but I think it was very evident early on. That team was going to stink, and I think he just checked out. I really
Yep.
do. Like I
We saw
think
the same thing when he was in Jacksonville.
yeah, I
His
think
first year in LA, he was a star. So
he was going to play, and he was going to play not to get hurt. And again, I'm not condoning any of this. I think for the amount of
right,
money these guys get paid, you should go out and play for your teammates.
hundred
So
percent.
I'm not saying it's a good character trait, but I lean way more heavily towards that side than I would that he's cooked. Um, I think he's going to go to Miami again. He won it out of Jacksonville, went to the big star, the big bright lights of LA. Now he's going to the big bright lights of South Beach. I think he's going to have fun there. I think you're going to see old Jalen Ramsey there. I really do. He's going to play in warm weather again, so he's not going to, I think that's a great deal for Miami,
Agree.
and I'll leave it at that. Um, Last thing I want to get to though, because you already brought it up. We had a trade for the number one pick. Chicago moved back. They did in my opinion they did the right thing and kept Justin Fields and not want to draft a quarterback. They're gaining more draft capital. They're moving back to 9, and you know I have a very strong opinion of who Carolina is going to take. I'm curious to see who you think they're taking.
I mean, I have a strong opinion as well. I think that they are going to take CJ Stroud out of Ohio State. I think that they did that move because I think if they were smart about it, I think they could have gotten um, CJ at a different number. I think the Texans really want Bryce Young, and so I think they were kind of bidding against the Texans moving up. I think the Texans could have been the team to offer a better package, considering they had the number 2 pick. Carolina, I mean not Carolina, but Chicago wouldn't have had to move obviously far back, moving back one slot, but still getting back that kind of capital, and you get your guy. I think that was really the team that they were kind of bidding against there, and I think they take CJ though. I think they saw all the reports are saying that they love CJ from the combine and they had great interviews with him. So I think CJ is going to be the pick there.
So I a million percent agree with you. And this was kind of my argument towards you know um, Bryce Young not throwing. I think we all knew Carolina and Indy were going to be the two teams that really wanted to aggressively move up and try to draft a quarterback. We all know Houston's taking a quarterback. Um, Houston apparently, at the same time, after the combine, apparently Carolina got very aggressive about moving up. That to me says they went to the combine and they saw what they needed to see, and they were very comfortable if they were able to move up and getting the guy they want to get. And I believe that guy is CJ Stroud.
Yep.
Now, I don't think Houston made a mistake because, again, I think Houston's going to be fine at 2 because then Bryce Young's just going to fall
in their lap. Yep.
But that being said, I also think Houston dropped out of getting to 1 because they saw enough out of CJ Stroud to say if Carolina did jump us, which they did now, and they take Bryce Young, that they're okay with CJ Stroud. I think CJ Stroud did himself a lot of service in going to that combine, performing very well, and throwing. And that's why I think it was a mistake for Bryce Young not to throw. I understood Gene's point of view, but that being said, I also look at it at some point, you're still going to make those throws. So what's the difference if you have to throw the ball a little higher than the other guys at the combine, or if you do it at your pro day? That's the arm that you have. Like, it is going to be what it's going to be. So the teams are going to evaluate you one way or the other on that throw. So I think CJ Stroud made himself a lot of money. I'm not buying into the Anthony Richardson thing because I find it really hard to believe you move up to number 1 to take a project unless you were just absolutely head over heels in love with them. And I just think I think you have 2 guaranteed guys that are going to be good in CJ and Bryce. And if you move up to 1 and don't take either one of them, and Anthony Richardson ends up being a bust,
you set your franchise back at least 10 years.
It's a decade. It is. And I think you can't afford to do that. If you're moving up to 1, you have to take Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. And I think they're taking CJ Stroud. I really do. I'm sure, this will get leaked before the draft, which sucks because I really did used to like the mystery of it, like going up and not knowing who was going to be called. But I think we're going to find out soon. And again, I think it's going to be CJ. So, good for him. I don't think an Ohio State quarterback's ever been taken 1 before. So I think that would be the first for him. And I think he's going to a good situation. The DJ Moore part of that package kind of sucks because he's
hustling.
It makes sense for Chicago. But,
oh, yeah, for sure.
Chicago all of a sudden,
good free agency so far.
Very good. Signed 2 good linebackers.
Yep.
Got DJ Moore.
Got draft capital. And I think that the number 9 pick, I think that's seriously in play for Jackson Smith and Jigba to reunite him with Justin Fields. And then you roll out a receiving core of JSN, Darnell Mooney, and DJ Moore. Like, you talk about CJ not having weapons last year. Then you get them legit weapons this year.
See, I don't know if they got a receiver there because they have Claypool too. So
they do, but I think the Claypool experiment last year, I think it kind of showed you that you wasted a pick on a second round pick, pick 33. Like, I think that's absolutely insane for Chase Claypool. And he didn't perform at all last year. And I get it, it's just half a season in Chicago, but if I have a chance to reunite those guys, like we see how it's worked with Joe and Jamar in Cincinnati. We see that, in Jacksonville, Trevor and Travis Etienne, the connection that they have. If I can get that familiarity there and that's something that they want to do, like, I think that's something that could be for sure on the table.
So last thing I want to mention, because there's, a lot of people thought if they stayed there and they weren't drafting a quarterback, they thought maybe Jalen Carter was going to be the pick. Not sure if you saw the reports that came out of his pro day today. That from obviously he didn't do any interviews, didn't answer any questions. He gained 9 pounds from the combine to his pro day, and apparently was slower in all the running, and he was noticeably out of breath, and obviously just didn't prepare. So, what are your thoughts on that?
If everything is true, then in a sense, from a humane standpoint, I 100% understand it. You got stuff that's going on that's quite literally about your life. And so I get it. The NFL is going to be your future, but you have other stuff that you have going on right now, and you have to get that all squared away. with that said, though, it's like, hey, if you're not about this, I draft you. The NFL at the end of the day is a business. So if I draft you, I need you to be on top of everything. I want to care about you as a person, but that's just not how the NFL works. Like it's a numbers and success driven league. So I think it is going to hurt his stock a little bit. And the other issue is that you have four quarterbacks who are going to be pretty sought after. So teams are going to be trading up for quarterbacks. There's going to be uncertainty there with Jalen Carter, and you got Will Anderson, who people even before the incident thought was a better defensive prospect than Jalen Carter. So I think we could see an instance where Jalen Carter slips to the 10 to 15 range. But I also wouldn't be surprised if teams were like, hey, we know this is going to be an anomaly for him. He made a mistake as a kid, and we're going to work with him and get past that, and he's going to be the all-pro caliber player that we think he should be.
I think he's not doing himself any favors right now, which is a little troubling to me. Like you said, from the human being standpoint, he's a 20-year-old kid that that made a mistake, and he didn't directly have a effect on this, but he was part of a mistake where people lost their lives. Then on top of that, he's now been charged, and there's not going to be, I said this on the other show when we talked about it. There's not going to be a resolution to this before the draft. So whoever is drafting him is drafting him knowing that you're going to have to deal with this with him right off the bat. Like
Mhm.
there's going to be a trial. There's you're going to have to go through all that with him, and a lot of teams might steer clear of that. I will be curious. I think he went from a consensus talent wise, top 5 pick for sure, but I think we all assumed, like, other than Will Anderson, then the next team that picked that didn't take a quarterback was probably taking him. I am curious to see where he falls. I mean, he's again, he's costing himself some money, and it's again, I think it's stay out of the spotlight, but behind the scenes, be doing the work that you need to do and stay in shape, and be ready to talk to these teams and show out for these teams. And he's not even doing that. By the looks of it, he just kind of stayed inside and ate and didn't work out, and was not in good shape at the combine. So it's a little concerning. To your point, I think whoever drafts him, I hope gets him kind of squared away right away, and is like, hey, like, we're here to support you. We believe in you. We believe what you can do. The person you can still be, but we need to get some of this crap under control, and you need to meet us halfway and make some better decisions here. So I wish the best for him. We're going to find out soon. So I mean, we're only a couple weeks away. That he's going to be one of the biggest storylines come draft night when you get away from the quarterbacks. I mean, I think he's the next biggest one, to be honest.
Yep, agreed.
But we'll have more NFL for you guys. We're running late. I know the bracket thing went long, but we do have to touch on UFC because there's a championship fight Saturday, and we're going to talk a ton more NFL with the draft coming up. And like I said, there's still a bunch of big names out there for free agency. So we'll be updating.
Gene's going to have some hot takes for us next week, and I'm sure there's going to be more people on the move, and he's going to be excited about a new Eagle coming in, and maybe angry about an Eagle leaving. Who knows? But
I just got a couple of texts here. I got one from surprised you guys haven't talked about the Raiders. Listen, if we weren't 2 hours and 40 minutes deep into this, I think me and Cottrell would both like to talk about the absolute mess that Raiders free agency has been so far.
Yep.
But we can delve into that next week. The other text I got is no shortstop list tonight. This one's easy. With the bracket, we knew we were going to go long. We don't like rushing through our baseball lists. And on top of that, you cannot do the shortstop list without Gene being present. We could not have Corey Seager week without Gene. So I would assume next week we will do shortstops and probably third baseman at the same time to catch up. But Gene does take pride in his list, just like me and Cottrell do. And we agreed last week that we didn't want to do that without him. So, and not have him be able to sit here and present it and defend it and talk through it. So shortstop list will be next week. We didn't forget it. We scheduled ahead of time that we weren't going to do it tonight. So that will be on next week's show. But enough of all that. we're gonna jump into the UFC. Two big fights this week. O2 Arena in London. It does start at 5 o'clock. Remember that because they are ahead of us. So
Yep.
main card starts at 5, not 10, which is kind of good because you can watch the main card and then still go out at 8 o'clock and get drunk
Go
for
out and
St. Patty's Day.
watch college basketball.
Correct. So lines up well for you, honestly. So which fight you want to start with?
We could start with Justin and Raphael.
All right. So I don't know about you. Like maybe I'm off on this, but I was shocked when I saw that Justin was the underdog in this fight. Um, I know me, you, and Gene have had passionate discussions debating about Justin Gaethje, and I think we all kind of fall in different spots about it. I mean, but I mean, the dude hasn't been beaten by anybody that's not, I would say, elite. And last fight looked great. And we get Raphael coming in, who is definitely one of the up and coming shooting rising stars in the lightweight division right now. His highlight reel is crazy to watch if you haven't. He's got the Matrix move, which he does all the time, which is just insanity to watch. It almost looks fake. But this is a very interesting fight. I mean, what do you think about it?
I mean, I think it'll be interesting. Obviously, Justin has the background with the wrestling and all that. So I think this would be, if Justin's smart, I think this would be a fight that he tries to take to the canvas and just works on the ground. If it goes that way, I can see Gaethje winning a decision, and I think it'd be like a 4-1 kind of decision. I think Justin should have success getting this fight to the ground. The problem is that, I saw Justin Gaethje fight a guy like Michael Chandler, and if he does the stand-up thing with Raphael, I think he's in danger of getting knocked out. So, I mean, it really just depends on which Justin Gaethje we see. Ultimately, I'm hoping that Raphael wins. There's nothing against Justin, but I'm ready to move the needle in that division. I'm ready for something new because if Gaethje wins, he's right back in the title mix. We see him fight a number one, if not the champion caliber contender, and we're right back to where we were at. Just shake things up. I'm hoping Raphael wins, but I got Gaethje here by decision, and I think it's a 4-1 decision for him with a lot of wrestling.
Yeah, so I think the dud factor in this is high. And I say that because, I think anytime you see two big names like this fight, you expect fireworks. I agree with you 100%. I think if Justin Gaethje's smart, he's coming in, he's mixing up his stand-up, and he's working takedowns, he's working his wrestling. I don't want to call it lay and pray because he doesn't do that, but I think that's the type of fight, we're likely to get. This is a fight where you don't want to mess around with and try to like you said, try to knock somebody out and do something style points wise. Get your hand raised, get a big victory over an up and coming guy who has all the talent in the world and is going to be around for a while. Just get that victory, on your belt, on your record, and move on and get ready for like you said, most likely a title shot after this. I think Gaethje's got to keep. I think Gaethje has to mix it up. Same kind of thing. Keep Raphael guessing. Don't get into a pattern per se. I don't think just come out and just blindly shoot. But I think if you can keep Raphael guessing and not comfortable and not let him really get set in the pocket and start, utilizing that striking that he has, I think Gaethje has a good shot to win. I'm going the same thing as you. So I'm going Gaethje by decision. I think he figures it out. I think he gets it done. Not sure if I'm going 4-1. I'll go like 3-2. But I think Gaethje clearly wins the fight. Part of me, I don't know about you, part of me is shocked that Gaethje took this fight with, like you said, kind of the aftermath of what's on the line here. Like if he loses, I mean, that kind of really shuffles him down at that point. But
I just don't know how much. I don't know how much room Gaethje has, though. Like obviously we just saw Charles and Islam not too long ago. I mean, who knows if Charles would have taken the Gaethje fight because he has his eyes set on Dariush anyway. And then Poirier and Gaethje, like that's a fight that we're probably not getting now at this point. So I mean, there really wasn't much wiggle room for Gaethje.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, I guess again, I think if he wins this, I mean, I think you're getting. I mean, would you agree you're getting Gaethje Islam then probably?
It depends because if Charles and Beneil is actually happening, I think the winner of that automatically gets a title shot. I think he can get the loser of that fight, or if he wants to fight Dustin, then I think that would be the matchup. But I think if Charles beats Beneil Dariush, then I think he's deserving of the rematch, especially because it was his belt originally. And then if Beneil beats Charles, it's like, hey, I've been in the UFC for a while now. I've beaten everybody in front of me. I want a title shot.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I really can't argue any of that logic. Good thing is, like you said, I'm just glad there's so many options at 155. I mean, that division is still the one that is loaded, and you
Best
have guys,
division of the UFC for
yeah,
sure.
and you have a bunch of guys that are great and elite, and they want to fight people. So that's those. I think it. I hope it's a good fight. I think it has a chance to be a little bit more boring than people think it's going to be, but
Mhm.
still, again, still two top names going at it. So. Last fight we're going to talk about is the main event, championship rematch, uh, the third fight in a trilogy. Leon Edwards, who is now the champion, versus Kamaru Usman, who I don't know if we put the wire-to-wire jinx on him or what we did, but I mean, we were getting into heated arguments about him being on the all-time Mount Rushmore, and he went out and dominates a fight and he gets kicked in the face with like 2 minutes to go and loses his belt after having it for like 3 years. So this is the third fight between these guys. It's going to be in London, Leon's hometown. Some people think that's an advantage. Other people think it puts more pressure on the fighter. I don't know where you fall on that one. But how do you see this fight playing out?
So I think the hometown thing, for me, it varies from fighter to fighter. I think with a guy like Leon, I think it'll give him confidence, but I think the majority of the time, I am of the mindset that fighting in your hometown, you got a lot more pressure, especially when it's a guy, or in this case, a guy like Leon, who's you're going overseas to fight. Obviously we've seen Derek Lewis have his issues in Houston, which is where he's from. I
Great
think it's a lot
example.
different when you're fighting in like the city that you're from. But like you see these fighters, they just had the card in Brazil. Pretty much every outside of Glover Teixeira, pretty much every Brazilian won on that card. So I think it's beneficial in certain places. It just really depends on the fighters. I think for Leon, it will be kind of I don't want to say a rite of passage for him, but it's a situation where like, all right, I've earned this. Like he realizes, I have the belt now. We're in my backyard. These people are rooting for me. I've earned this opportunity to be competing here in my hometown and all this. With that said, though, I don't know how I could have seen the first two fights between these two, and Leon has won one round, and I would pick Leon in this upcoming fight. I get it. The story behind everything is phenomenal. The head kick was beautifully set up. But for eight, eh, 7.5 of the 8 rounds they fought, Kamaru is dominated. I get it. Leon won the first round in the second fight, but Kamaru's been dominant, and I think when you have these champions that lose their belt off of something like this, they come back hungry. We saw what Amanda just did when she was coming for her belt back. We kind of have an idea what we think Valentina's going to do fighting for her belt back. We'll see Izzy next month fighting for his belt back. Like these big time champions have lost their belt recently, and I think you're gonna have a tough out when you get a pissed off champion who everyone considers if not the pound for pound best, for sure, guy who we consider the best in their division.
I agree with everything you said. I look at like certain people. I think there's a difference in fighting in your, you know, home country when you still live there. Like, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
those Brazilian guys, like when they fight in the US, they fly up here to fight, like, but they still live in Brazil. They're comfortable.
Yep.
Uh, to my knowledge, Leon still lives there. Um,
Right.
but when they proposed this fight, Usman said, like, sign it. Like, I want to beat him. I'm taking the belt back in front of his people. Like that's what he said. He's like I'm ending his reign in front of his hometown. Like he's like I want that to hurt. So I mean, he's laser focused. There's certain people. I think it tends, I think unless for the rare exception, I think it's like, for instance, like Connor. I would not fight Connor in Ireland. Like
Agreed.
you are out of your damn mind. Like not doing it, not doing it. Um, and I think there's other people that you can get away with it.
Mhm.
I think a lot of here's where I think this hurts Leon. Like you said, they've now fought 8 rounds, and you could say for 7.5 of them, there has been no doubt on this planet that Kamaru Usman's the better fighter. I think if this fight starts that way again, and then you start to press, then I'm in front of my hometown fans, and this guy's kicking my ass again, and then I think you start to press, and then that's where I think you get in trouble, and I think that could happen to Leon. Um, like you said, I give him all the credit in the world. He was down 4-0. I mean, UFC released a clip today of his corner yelling and cursing at him, before they went out for the 5th round, being like, you're pouting, like you're not doing anything, you got to pull it out of the fire. Like 2 of his guys said it, and then he goes out and lands, the leg kick from heaven.
Yep.
But I think Usman's just a better fighter. I mean, I think he was somebody early on, when we first started doing the show, I thought was good, and he's just grown on me so much. And I went back and watched some of his older fights and just how much better he's gotten each fight. I just think he's the best 170 in the world, and I think you're going to see that on Saturday night. And I agree with you. I think I don't care how good you are and how mentally sharp you are. I think at some point it's just human nature. You just get complacent when you're champ that long. I think it's hard to convince yourself to train harder this camp than you did the last camp when I just walked through some guy. You know what I mean? I think it's
Yep.
just I think it's human nature, and but again, when you beat guys like that, and then you have to fight them again right away in a rematch, you get the really hungry, focused version of that fighter, and I think that's what you're going to get with Kamara this weekend. I think he wins. I think he stops the fight. I don't think it goes 5 rounds. I think I mean, it'll be end new, but I think the belt goes back to Kamara, and we reset the division again. So I have Usman by 3rd round stoppage.
I got Usman by decision. I do think he dominates. I'm right there with you, RJ. I just don't think Leon will let himself go out in front of his home crowd. I think he fights quite literally to the bitter end.
See, I think it'll be good. I think it's a good card. Like I said, I think that both those fights have potential to be very good, but um, we'll see.
Yes,
That's it.
sir.
We got you. Gotta be kidding me! This marathon is over.
All right, I'll start. Mine's is super quick, and it's gonna be one that I've been kind of consistent with. So I got on, and it's the NBA, and they're handling the John Morant situation. I got on the NBA earlier when we talked about Kyrie Irving, and I was okay with the suspension and all the stuff that you wanted him to do. I was perfectly fine with it, but it was the extra stuff after that was just for the PR. It wasn't to help make Kyrie a better person. It wasn't to help make him learn from the situation. It was just so that the NBA looked like the great, you know, leaders and forward thinkers that they are and things like that. And they're kind of doing it again with John Morant. John Morant was suspended for 2 games originally after the Instagram live video where he had a gun while he was in the club. And I 100% understand that's not okay. Like, you can't do that. I was cool with the NBA suspending him. After that, he took an indefinite leave from the Grizzlies. Again, I'm cool with that. If he wants to get his mind right, he's got a lot going on. He's a young kid. He's making a terrible mistake, and he was, I don't want to say on the verge of messing up his career, but he was going down a path that, if he kept going down that path, things could have got bad for him real fast. But the NBA came out again and said that John Morant had basically been sent to rehab. They called it something else, but essentially it was just rehab. He got sent to rehab, and then they came up with a suspension for eight more games for him. My whole thing is, if people, Twitter, and just in general didn't make a bigger deal about it beforehand, I don't think the NBA would have put out an 8-game suspension for him. I don't think they would have sent him to rehab. Ja Morant is a young kid that's been making dumb mistakes. Should he be punished for it? Absolutely. But for the league to be taking these aggressive stances for him, the 8-game suspension after he's already been suspended and he's left the team indefinitely, it's just a way for the NBA to save face and say, hey, we're trying to do the right thing here, but just it doesn't make sense to me. I just want some more consistency and have this stance from the beginning. If you would have came out, suspended them 10 games from the start, and said, "Hey, we're not dealing with this," I'm all good with it. Don't give them the 2 games and say, "Hey, oh, there's been more outrage about it. Let's do more so that we look better." So for me this week, the NBA.
On, you gotta be kidding me.
I agree. I mean, I think a lot of it boiled down to they were doing their investigation and all that, and they found out what they found out. But I agree with you. At that point, then do your investigation, and then when you're done, if you want to give them 10 games, then give them 10 games or 8 games or whatever the hell you want to do. But it's kind of like it's just so wishy-washy. Like you said, it makes it sound like it's not even so much what they want. It's they want to claim the moral high ground all the time.
Yep.
Be like, oh man, like it's Ja Morant's trending again. Like we have to suspend him. But yeah, I mean, listen, Ja is I think you put it very accurately and pointedly. Like he was starting to go down a road where you go much further down the road, you do make a mistake, you can't walk back type thing. Um, and that would be a shame because I mean he's 23 years old and he has the ability to be the face of the NBA in the next couple years. I mean he's electric to watch. I mean I think he needs to have better people around him. And again, like you said, he's 23. He has $50 million in the bank. Like that is, I don't think people realize. Again, we think too much about all these athletes, and you don't think about what it is like to be like a person. Like if you were 23 and had $50 million in the bank, like what would you do? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
these guys are getting flown all over the country. They're playing a game. They have you know they have the money to buy any damn thing they want at any time they want. Um, they're not hurting for fans and fans that are women by any means, if you understand what I'm saying. Like it,
Mm-hmm.
it's he's just got to grow up. That's all it is. He's just got to grow up. That's all. So I mean, again, I think he'll be fine. I think this was a good wake up call for him before anything happened bad, like really bad.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's eligible to play Monday. So
Yeah.
he's almost
Yeah.
at this point now because they gave him credit for all the other stuff. So that's good. Mine's super dumb and super silly. Katie, if you're still listening, sign off because you're not going to like this. But I'm going to go with the North Carolina Tar Heels deciding to bail out of the NIT this week. After they didn't make the NCAA tournament, which they shouldn't have, Baycott got hurt and in their ACC run. Obviously, the NIT was going to invite them. They deserved to go. I mean, they were still one of the best next 16 teams to go. And obviously, North Carolina is a huge draw. I mean, they're one of the blue bloods, college programs in the country. Top 2 or 3 job you could possibly have. They released a letter that they sent to the NITs, saying they respectfully decline. They're not going to show up and play, and they're focused on next year and getting their kids ready for next year, so forth and so on, blah, blah, blah. I hate the way it came out. I hate the way they did it. Obviously Baycott and Davis and those guys, they're not going to play in it anyway. So at that point, you can't get better experience for kids that you want to get ready for next year than playing in a game and playing them in a tournament game nonetheless. You saw it with Villanova last night. Justin Moore did not play, and what's the other kid's name? Lottery
Your
pick.
lottery pick. Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't play either, and they still went out and played because all those kids that were on the court last night are going to be starters next year. And they lost their game. They lost and they got sent home, but it's still good experience. At that point, like you're not getting clowned or disrespected or embarrassed more if you get knocked out of the NIT. At that point, nobody cares. You know what I mean? Like it's not like you lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament. And honestly, there's nothing more embarrassing than you guys went through already than being the number 1 unanimous team to start the year and you didn't make the tournament. That was embarrassing. And all you did, in my opinion, was embarrass yourself more. Let the kids play, man. Let the kids that want to play. Go coach them. That's what you're there for. It's not about money. It's not about anything else. Like if you really want to get your kids ready for next year, go get them experience. You're not going to get better experience in practice than you are playing in a game against another team. So the whole thing to me was it was North Carolina feeling sorry for themselves because of who they are and because of who their name brand is and all that junk. It wasn't about the kids and not wanting to play. It was about them being embarrassed and about them pouting and not getting in and being mad about it. So they took their ball and went home, and I think that sucks. So for me this week, North Carolina basketball.
Come on, you gotta be kidding me.
Well, we survived. We made it.
We did.
We did. It's 3 hours on the dot.
Yep. Three hours.
Long ass show. I thought it was great. Like I said, I'm getting a couple more texts. People that I guess are watching a little bit behind saying, you know, they're literally filling out brackets listening to us. So God, I hope we got it right, Control. That reminds me though, still have time to sign up for the show contest. Link is on the page if you need it. Text Cottrell if you know Cottrell or Gene or whatever. We'll gladly send it to you. Yep. Sign up. It's only $10. We had a lot of fun. I think we ended up with like 40 people last year. I know we got a lot of people signing up tonight and tomorrow before it starts. So you can sign up all the way before, up until the first game starts. It's fun, man. It's fun. We talk about it on the show. So if you do well, you'll get your shout outs. If you do horrible, like we all did last year, we're all going to bust each other's balls. Collectively as a show, we were terrible last year. We were.
But I mean, you're getting shot at new merch. We haven't even gotten the new merch yet. No. So you have a shot. Pick the color hoodie you want to go with, and we'll go from there. Obviously, we post the colors of the hoodies already with the white, the black, the blue, and the gray. Gray is my personal favorite. Got one on the way, but definitely be a fun one. I'm excited. I'm excited about this year's tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agreed last year was going to kind of be chaos, and we kind of got that. I think this year has. I mean, you saw it even with just us picking. I mean, there was a couple of brackets we were almost the same, and then other ones we went in completely different directions. And I think you have a lot of upset potential this year, so it'll be fun. I'm excited. I can't wait to turn it on in my office tomorrow and start watching it. It's the one beautiful thing I get to kind of I guess sneakily do. You have people that have to watch it on their computer screens. I'm lucky that I get to work and plop it up on my big TV and watch it. So
I work today on my off day, so I took tomorrow off. I will be going somewhere.
Attaboy.
Games all day. So you guys started it. So we're 3 years in at this point. So
yep,
I'm in. I'm all in now.
Well, enjoy. I'm assuming you're going somewhere, Audia, hanging out, having some drinks.
And then she has to go to work. She'll meet me after.
Damn. All right. Well, enjoy. Kent State play? Do they play tomorrow? Or they play Friday.
They're the last game on Friday, 9:55 p.m.
Oh man, Friday. You got to wait all day.
Yep, a lot of anticipation.
Oof. All right. Well, I don't have to worry about that because Michigan didn't make it. So
it's been a fun one.
It has been a fun one. Everybody that hung in with us, I thank you. Gene, enjoy the rest of your trip, buddy. Be happy to have you back next week.
Make it home safe.
Get home safe. Don't fall in. If you do, make sure you have your floaties on so they can find you. And have fun, and we'll can't wait to have you back next week. We'll have another fun show next week. So for show 127, it's finally over. Me and Cottrell, my man, thank you for keeping this train on the tracks, and that's all I got. My throat hurts.
All right, signing out.
Later, boys.